Sipping an ice-cold Coke straight from the bottle, the glass damp with condensation, and slouching in the chair with my bare feet up on the balcony wall, I studied the sweeping vista before me. In all the years I'd lived here, I'd never tired of it. Heat beat down in an unceasing wave from an azure sky with small cotton ball clouds almost immobile, as if they were playing a trick on me, refusing to move until I looked away, then inching across the sky just to freeze again at my glance. Perspiration formed at my temples, tickling slightly as each drop slowly found a meandering path down the side of my face, gaining speed as it hit the clear runway of my neck. The back of my white cotton shirt was stuck to the wooden chair, not the most comfortable feeling, I decided, and I was too lazy to unwind the blue and white striped sun awning to give me some respite. I didn't care. 800 plus feet below me, the Aegean Sea moved like slow liquid sapphire, ripples crossing the caldera, the crater formed by a sunken extinct volcano. I watched ripples catch the sun, sending winking diamond-like pulses of intense light lancing into my eyes and making me squint. I knew from experience those ripples were, in fact, foot-high swells. But from this distance and height, they had the appearance of ripples on a pond, lines of nature's aqua army marching across the saccharine expanse with regimental precision and perfect geometric beauty. The air, normally crystal clear, was slightly opaque, almost smoggy, a haze of distorting heat hanging over the island. We hadn't had a decent wind in several days, and the Meltemia, a summer wind that normally swept across the island, was not in the forecast. In the distance across from me, I could see Thracia, a long, seemingly barren brown-grey rocky island and home to 250 hardy souls. Shielding my brow, I casually watched seagulls circling over the distant marina below, tiny white dots moving, some clockwise, some counterclockwise, creating an avian wind devil. They must have found a school of fish, or discarded chum, or floating garbage. Sharp car horns honked, bleated, and echoed. Mopeds sped by sounding desperate, tinny and frail like angry wasps, drawing my attention to the noise of a bustling town around and behind me, a miasma of sounds blending together. One had to concentrate to discriminate them. A bicycle bell ringing out a warning, two males arguing vociferously, unidentifiable clunking and clattering, cars revving high as they climbed the steep street. All sounds I had grown used to, the background music of my life. Condensation on the Coca-Cola bottle dripped and dampened my shirt front as I took another swig. Glancing at the old wind-up Timex on my wrist, I realised I'd need to head out soon. I also noticed the leather wristband fraying. I'd have to replace it soon before it broke, and I lost my most precious possession. 11:20. Should I eat before leaving? No. I could stop and get something fresh on the way back. Nerves fluttered in my stomach. It was an unusual feeling for me, and to be honest, I didn't really like it. But the fact was, I was very nervous. What would she look like? I hadn't heard from my sister in going on 15 years. Her call had come as a huge surprise as I sat watching satellite news in the living room, a late sun dropping towards the horizon, casting a yellow-gold parting display of glory through the glass and wood double doors. Sunlight on the wall was distorted. Small imperfections in the handmade window panes magnified by light passing through them, adding decorative swirls and splotches on the wall. Lost in the developing situation in Syria as reported by Al Jazeera, the sudden startling ring of the telephone had made me jump as if electrocuted. I'd reached for the cordless phone on a side table without thinking, without looking, and, typically me, knocked it to the floor. Scrabbling around on hands and knees, I finally found it. It had made its way under the side table somehow, as if the damn thing had a mind of its own, deliberately trying to hide from me, maybe protecting me, a warning, don't answer, you'll regret it. Hello? I said into the recalcitrant handset, still on my hands and knees. Aidan? Yes? I articulately responded, rising and flopping back on the couch, bare feet finding the coffee table for support. It's Alexis. I sat with the phone to my ear, stunned into immobility. I hadn't heard my younger sister's voice in at least a decade and a half. It immediately brought images to mind. Her fine-boned slenderness, long, ruler-straight dark chestnut hair, pretty face, intense dark and serious eyes, a smile that warmed me inside. Aiden? Yeah? It's me, Alexis. Don't you recognize your sister's voice? Her voice sounded the same, soft, clear, intelligent, and articulate. I knew she was an accomplished scientist, a marine biologist, and highly respected. I'd read her articles even though I couldn't understand them, followed her exploits and kept track of her speaking engagements. But that voice, I hadn't heard it in so long. Aiden! Sorry, sis, You shocked me. Absent-mindedly, I bent forward and reached for the remote, looking for the unfamiliar mute button. Aiming it at the TV, I stabbed the button several times, the sound flickering off. On, off, on, off, on. Shit. Finally, silence descended. I seemed to have become mute and dumb all of a sudden, listening to the hissing silence of several thousand miles of telephone line. I guess I could have talked had my mind decided to show up, but it hadn't. Aiden, are you all right? Alexis asked. Is this a bad time? Yeah, no. Sorry, you caught me off guard. What did she want? Maybe I should ask. What's up? How are you? She asked. Good. Man, I sounded stupid. Silence filled the void again. I'd had thousands of things to say to my sister over the years, thoughts and feelings I'd wanted to tell her about. I'd had successes and failures in work and in love that I'd wished I'd been able to share with her. And with almost 15 years of accumulated news, I couldn't find my voice. I couldn't start. It was an awkward, stilted conversation that followed, Alexis actually asking me for a favour after all these years. I'd agreed instantly, unhesitatingly and unthinkingly before hearing what the favour was. Had she asked for the world, I'd have stolen it for her. It had always been that way with Alexis. Since she was born, I had been driven to protect her. Adolescence, rather than driving a wedge between us, kept us close. Much of it had to do with the family constantly moving as we followed Dad's job, friends increasingly hard to make, isolation a lonesome burden we'd shared. Now I was nervous, stomach flittering. Now I was regretting my largesse. Sitting sweating on the balcony, in the harsh light of day, I wasn't quite sure I'd made the right decision. With a final sip of Coke, draining the bottle, I burped to release built-up gas and swung bare feet off the balcony wall. Rising, I stared at the town to my left and right as it clung to the edge of the cliff. Whitewashed walls blindingly bright, saffron blue domes and minarets sharply standing out. The jumbled mishmash of square homes seemingly piled one on top of the other in an unplanned, haphazard spread. From my viewpoint, I could see sparkling crystal-clear swimming pools in enclosed backyards glittering blue in the sun. Oya was quintessentially Greek. It was quaint and charming. It was home. Turning, I stepped through open wood and multi-paned double doors into the cool dimness of my living room. The hardwood floor, ebony dark with age, felt beautifully cool on my bare feet. I wended my way to the kitchen, dropping the empty Coke bottle into a half-full recycle bin, glass clinking against glass, Coke and green Mythos beer bottles. Glancing at my watch again, I decided to head out, even if it was a bit early. I was too antsy. I could mosey along and enjoy the scenery, try to relax. Santorini National Airport was only half an hour away. Peeling the sweaty shirt off my back, I headed upstairs to change, maybe put on some socks and shoes too. Weather waited patiently for the cramped aisle lineup to move. She felt sticky heat flow through the aircraft cabin when the door opened. It made her shiver involuntarily. Standing, backpack over one shoulder, she leaned against the airplane seat headrest with one arm waiting. Her mind was mulling over the sight of Thera as they'd approached. It seemed like a large, elongated brown rock from the air, rather dull and uninteresting. As they'd descended, she'd seen blindingly white towns hanging onto steep cliffs at water's edge, hills rising behind, towns scattered haphazardly across the island, and finally, the ugliness of an airport. long runways like scars marring the landscape. The island was a singularly unappealing sight from the air. She just couldn't imagine how she was going to cope over the next 6 months. She was still ticked off. It wasn't fair. Mum's work always came first, Weather knew that. But Mum taking a 6-month scientific oceanographic expedition was just too much. Why did Mum make her come halfway around the world? Why did she have to leave her friends behind? Why did she have to take correspondence courses to stay caught up in school? It wasn't fair. Her stomach churned with nervousness and mild anger that had followed her all the way from Illinois. The passenger lineup started moving like an accordion or caterpillar, front first, gaps growing between passengers, pauses, gaps collapsing as people paused to let another passenger in. She followed, picking up the strange scent of unfamiliar surroundings mixed with aircraft fuel and exhaust fumes. Weather was surprised when she had to climb downstairs to deplane, and even more surprised to see a double-articulated bus waiting to take passengers to the terminal. She'd never seen an airport like it before. It seemed to take forever before the bus moved, and it was too hot inside, its open doors and windows counteracting any air conditioning effect, if it had air conditioning. As the bus jerked side to side, Weather holding onto a strap, her body swaying as lateral forces tugged at her, she wondered why Mom rarely talked about Uncle Aidan. She'd never explained their estrangement. Weather wondered what he'd look like now. Would he still be like the single sun-faded photo on Mom's dresser, the one with the two of them when they were young, Mum about Weather's age, 14? Her stomach churned as she contemplated spending 6 months with someone she knew next to nothing about. A flash of anger hit when she remembered Mom taking her cell phone away from her. "We can't afford long-distance calls, Weather." It just wasn't fair. How was she supposed to stay in touch with her friends? Weather followed the other passengers into the terminal, spotting a couple of luggage carousels in the large arrivals hall. She looked around, wondering if she'd be able to recognize Uncle Aidan. All she saw was a crowd of people, almost all of them. Greek, loud, shouting and waving in groups. Some strange garbled announcement came over the public address system, unintelligible even if she could speak Greek. A rumble followed. She saw one of the luggage carousels start to turn. Like a bunch of lemmings, passengers surged towards it. What would Uncle Aidan be like? Would he be like Mom, calm, smart, and seemingly proficient in everything he did? Nervously, she looked around, the carousel squeaking and rumbling with no sign of suitcases. She waited. Weather caught sight of him as he entered the arrivals hall from a blindingly intense brightness outside. Her breath caught. There was no doubt at all it was Uncle Aidan, his face carrying familiar traces of Mom. Her heart tripped. She felt an immediate attraction. It was completely uncontrollable, totally surprising her. Why? Heat flushed through her. She felt her cheeks get warm. Damn. But geez, Uncle Aidan was. Frowning, she turned away before he spotted her, swearing under her breath. Anger rose. What the hell was wrong with her? Turning slightly, she glanced at him again out of the corner of her eye. It hit her again, a flush of heat, heart palpitating. She didn't understand. It wasn't as though she'd never seen more handsome guys, but there was an unidentifiable quality about him that hit her hard. She liked how his sandy brown hair with darker roots seemed to fall into his eyes. She liked how it seemed unbrushed, unkempt. She liked how his angular face was lightly stubbled and unshaved, and he appeared tall, almost 6 feet. He stood relaxed and at ease, scanning the crowd. He had broad shoulders but was lanky, slender, a trim waist, both of his hands tucked into the back pockets of well-worn jeans. He looked fit, healthy and intensely male, and she couldn't take her eyes off him. Weather preferred dark-haired guys, muscular with clean-shaven faces. So why did she feel such a strong attraction to him? Then he spotted her. She saw his eyes and shivered. Steel-grey eyes bored into her. She stopped breathing when he smiled, his smile radiating pleasure and making her feel even warmer, her knees weak. What was wrong with her? Weather frowned and turned away, staring at the luggage carousel as bags started arriving. She pleaded with God, please, please let my blush go away. Gored. She'd never reacted this way before. Sweat had returned, my shirt sticking uncomfortably to my back. Why didn't they air condition the arrivals hall? It would surely reduce the swearing and frustrations of tired travellers. I'd clearly taken too much time to drive to the airport, or the flight had landed early. Very un-Greek-like. Passengers were crowding around a luggage carousel, waiting impatiently for their bags, jostling each other for prime positions at the front. I heard the tinny PA system announce the arrival of Aegean Airlines flight A3C365 from Athens, with typical Greek efficiency, half an hour after it had landed and disgorged its passengers. My eyes flicked from one female to the next, searching. I recognised Weather immediately when I caught sight of her. It was impossible not to. She stood in simple blue jeans and white t-shirt, a black backpack over one shoulder, her gaze taking in the surrounding arrivals hall. Weather was the spitting image of Alexis, just younger, smaller, petite. She had the same slender, willowy body. Despite being only 14, it was clear she was going to grow up tall, slim and fine-boned like her mother. She had the same dark chestnut hair, just cut short, feathered in layers, sort of spiky, framing an intensely attractive face, her features so familiar. I saw Alexis in that face, slim nose, darker eyebrows, high cheekbones, a mouth ready to smile, and an angular jaw. I smiled at the familiarity of her face, at a memory of Alexis at 14. Briefly I wondered why a slight rosy flush grew on her cheeks, and why she suddenly frowned before I was distracted. I saw her eyes as she turned away. It was like a punch to my gut. A wave of dizziness overcame me. Breathe, breathe. My heart constricted, chest tight. When she turned away from me to face the luggage carousel, I bent at the waist to breathe, hands on my knees, inhaling deeply, tamping down the sudden fear that had almost overwhelmed me. Finally, I could straighten. A few deep, calming breaths, and I walked over, hands trembling slightly. Weather? She turned, her beautiful eyes studying me. A trace of pink still graced her cheeks. Hi. Uncle Aidan, right? Her smile was beautiful, full of warmth, soft and open. Yeah. I smiled back at her, fascinated by how her blush intensified. Even the frown that made a return appearance was really charming on her. And then I wondered what I was supposed to do. Should I shake hands? Should I hug her? Kiss her cheek? I felt a bit like an idiot. She solved the problem by moving to me, arms slipping around my waist and hugging me briefly before turning back to the carousel. I hadn't time to hug back, but her hug lingered on my body like a ghostly remnant. A waft of lemony scent tickled my nose. Just point your bags out and I'll get them, I offered. You sure? She said, glancing up at me. They're a bit heavy. Yup. Don't worry, I'm big, I claimed, thrusting my chest out. And strong, I added with a curl of my arm. A manly man. Weather grinned. Uncle Aidan seemed like a bit of a goof. But with his antics, she felt something inside melt a bit. She had a sigh of relief inside that needed to get out. His smile was amazing. She turned her attention to the rumbling and squeaking carousel. I watched suitcases pass on the baggage carousel, which moved in fits and starts, jerkily, as if it had been maintained by Greek mechanics. I could picture them. 3 guys that just stared at it while they took a break from the grueling 15-minute journey to the airport and maybe passed a bottle of ouzo around too, before hitting the carousel with hammers and verbally assaulting it with plenty of swear words, ordering it to work properly. That one, Weather pointed. I scrambled after the passing blue suitcase. I think I wrenched a shoulder picking it up. Dropping it to the ground, I was surprised when a crater wasn't formed in the concrete. That one too, she exclaimed, pointing, her finger jabbing the air. I scrambled after another blue suitcase. No, not that one. That one. Over there, she said with urgency, finger jabbing away. Not that one. The other one. I gave up and turned to her. Listen, Weather, I said with a grin. Feel free to use identifiers. Hints, you know, Like what colour your suitcase is, or maybe other things that will, I don't know, identify it? Weather laughed and blushed again at his grin, a remarkably charming grin. Sorry, it's big, she said with a smile and stretching her arms apart. This big. And what? She asked with a straight face, almost pulling it off, but her giggle ruined it. That one, she said, smiling, arm lifted, finger pointing. I waited, not moving an inch. In fact, I didn't even look at the carousel. Weather smiled, waited a bit and pointed again. That one? She offered in a softer, questioning tone, dainty finger wiggling, her smile growing. I tried a frown and received another charming giggle. The red one with a blue tag, she finally conceded. I looked over my shoulder and dived after the passing red suitcase. Wrenching every muscle in my shoulder, I hauled it off the carousel and dumped it on the ground. I think the concrete floor might have shuddered slightly. I hoped it hadn't wakened the extinct volcano. What did you bring? Spare parts for a tank? I asked. She laughed, a lovely light laugh. Shoes, she replied cheekily. I liked her. I couldn't help it. And importantly, she made me smile. In the span of the very few minutes I'd known her, I'd found her quite charming. I liked her just a bit less when sweat poured out of me while lugging 2 extraordinarily heavy suitcases into the afternoon heat, Weather following me closely. I led her to the outdoor parking lot, wondering how she'd managed to change planes with her suitcases being so heavy. I was about to inquire when she insulted me. That's yours, she asked, laughing and staring at my car. I was not amused. A slight rush of indignation hit me. I happened to be very proud of my Fiat 500. It was beautifully petite, cute, black and red, a wolf in sheep's clothing. I had the SS Abarth version, the one with 170 Italian horses rampaging under the little hood. Yes, it's mine, and it does not like being laughed at, I said with a frown. And don't diss it. Small is almost always better, like watches and electronics and headaches, and suitcases and, as it happens, Fiats too. But where do you put the suitcases? Weather asked, now laughing while studying the small car. Good point. I hadn't expected 2 lead-filled suitcases. Weather began to relax around Uncle Aidan as he struggled with the suitcases. His smile, even if it made her heart behave oddly, was warm and welcoming. He was soft-spoken, seemingly gentle, easygoing and witty too. She just adored his eyes. Seeing his indignation when she laughed at his car was funny, but what was even funnier was, when he climbed into the car, seeing that he was wearing 2 different colour socks. How come? Your socks don't match. Glancing down, I tugged my jeans up a bit. How about that? I like it that way, I lied, not realising what I'd put on, probably too preoccupied. But blue and white, how preoccupied did one have to be? Very Greek, the colours, you know. With one suitcase tied to the roof, the other shoved into the tiny back seat, Weather stared with fascination at the passing scenery as Uncle Aidan navigated impossibly narrow roads, other cars barrelling along as if the devil himself was chasing them, horns blaring for no reason. She'd never seen houses so spotlessly white, and all of them were white, as if it was the law, no other colours allowed. How come every house is whitewashed? She asked. No air conditioning. It keeps the interiors cool. No, I mean, why not pink or green? Why white? Pink? I glanced across at her. Man, she was dangerously pretty. It's the law, I said with authority. Oh, I laughed. It's not the law, Weather. It's tradition. White paint was made from ashes, limestone. The island is an extinct volcano, you know. How was I supposed to know that? She asked. I gave her a running tour guide as we made our way back to Oya, on the northwestern tip of the island, climbing through the tall hills, winding back and forth on the narrow main road. Every so often, I saw Weather cringe at the passing of a large truck, its turbulence buffeting our small Fiat. Gradually, over the half hour of our trip, I calmed down in her presence to the point where I could breathe evenly. It was as I was explaining about the archipelago and Santorini being only one of the islands that she interrupted. "Where's Santorini?" "Here." "Isn't his Thera?" she asked. "Yup," I grinned. Too many people got confused. "I don't get it," she said with a frown of her brows, so I confused her. Thera, spelled with an E, is the classical name for Thera, spelled with an I, the official name of what everyone really knows as Santorini. "Okay. You understood that?" I asked with slight disbelief. "Sure, Thera, and Santorini. Easy." "Huh. Impressive. This girl was quick too." I had a hard time keeping my eyes on the road, though. She fascinated me. I couldn't help but study her, take in the shape of her face, her mouth, or enjoy her smile, which seemed to bring an intensity to the light in the car. She was a remarkably attractive girl. Not what I'd consider stunningly beautiful, but incredibly attractive, made more so by her emerging personality. Weather watched as they entered Oya, streets narrowing, whitewashed square and rectangular houses with window planters, or homes hidden behind tall whitewashed walls. Bougainvilleas and trumpet flower vines tumbled over the walls with fiery red or pink blooms. Noise assaulted her when she wound down the car window, every driver seemingly tooting their horn at pedestrians who didn't notice it was a road, and bicyclers weaving through traffic as if under the influence of several bottles of wine. Mopeds buzzed like angry bees. Small shops seemed to bustle with shoppers, goods spilling out onto storefront displays under colourful awnings. The scent of spices, cooking lamb and blooming flowers filled the car. It was quaint and very pretty, far different than the view from the airplane. Through it all, she was very conscious of Uncle Aidan studying her. She deliberately avoided looking at him after the first couple of times brought heat back to her cheeks. She couldn't ever remember blushing so much. Why? It made her a bit angry that she had no control over it. Here we are. Weather looked around. Uncle Aidan had parked on the side of a narrow cobblestone street just off a main road, half on the sidewalk, next to a white wall covered in tumbling dark pink bougainvilleas, and a small blue wooden door inset into the wall. This did not look like a house to her. Following him in as he struggled with the suitcases, she entered a small courtyard, white planters everywhere filled with various flowering plants adding colour and character. She saw a blue-painted wooden table and chairs on the cobbled ground, and a blue-painted front door, and intricate black wrought ironwork protecting windows on either side. What's with the blue? Inside, she felt it immediately, the air so much cooler than outside. The house felt small and cosy and sorta cute. The entry hall was small, ebony dark hardwood floors, a black iron banister and dark wood stairs leading up on the right, a small wrought iron and glass-topped side table with mail on it, a living room ahead, and an arched doorway on the left that led to what seemed to be a study. Walking into the living room, she saw wide glass and wood double doors, sunlight intensely bright outside, and an open-plan kitchen to the left. The living room furniture was simple and plain, sort of a meeting of Amish and Swedish, minimalist in rich woods. Peering out the doors, she gasped. The large balcony, whitewashed with a terracotta floor, gave out a spectacular, jaw-dropping vista. Unable to resist, with the sound of Uncle Aidan clattering up the stairs as he carried her suitcases muttering something about tanks, Weather opened the doors and stepped out onto the balcony, resting her elbows on the stone wall balustrade. There were a couple of houses below, some sparkling turquoise pools to the right and left, and several hundred feet below, water, a vast lagoon-like expanse with a ring of islands shimmering in the heat-hazed distance. The smell of salty brine and seaweed filled the air. Sun beat down, bathing her in warmth. Weather felt the last of her tension seep out of her. It was simply too beautiful to be worried. Uncle Aidan lived in paradise. "It's a caldera, the crater of an ancient volcano." Weather glanced to her side. Uncle Aidan was bending over, resting his elbows on the wall, forearms corded with muscles. He was squinting, his eyes taking in the view, his face in profile. From the side, she recognized Mom in his nose and the shape of his mouth. Her heart ached. Damn. Why? What was it about Uncle Aidan that seemed to touch her so deeply? She'd never seen him before, yet he seemed familiar. Why? How about a tour? He asked. "'Kay." I turned my back to the magnificent view, leaned back against the stone balustrade and pointed at my home. There, living room. There, kitchen. Back there, study. Aiming up to the second floor, I pointed as a smile grew on her face. "No, let me, Uncle," Weather said, smiling. She pointed. There, bedroom. There, bathroom. There, bedroom. I grinned. "Bravo, tour over. Want a drink? How about a cold Coke?" I did like her laughter. In the sunlight, her penetrating steel-grey eyes twinkled rather nicely. That night, I couldn't get to sleep. The ceiling fan rotated lazily, doing a fine job of not disturbing the air. On my back, with my arms under the pillow supporting my head, I wondered if the fan really made any difference at all. Was it one of those things we just took for granted? Assumed it worked because people told us it did. A mechanical placebo. Oh well. The white Egyptian cotton sheet felt cool on me. I could hear faint laughter and glasses clinking from a nearby tavern, their sounds floating to me on the air though open bedroom windows. Outside seemed almost daylight from a waxing gibbous moon, everything a bright, flat, bluish grey. I had to admit I was impressed. Weather, despite her age, was really impressive. I had no doubt Alexis was very proud of her. I sure as hell was. I think I had been expecting a petulant teenager fighting acne, hormones and adult rules. A girl filled with angst, in full revolt at having to relocate halfway across the world, just because her mother was doing her job. I knew I had been full of nervous worry at the prospect of meeting her, never having seen her before. She was a stranger to me, yet in so many ways not. She reminded me strongly of Alexis. Weather was not what I had expected, not at all. She was a personality waiting to happen, full of life, inquisitive and so much smarter than I'd ever imagined. For a 14-year-old, she was remarkably articulate. Then again, what did I know about 14-year-olds? Her smile was quite attractive, and I wasn't sure why she'd blush and frown so frequently, but I thought it cute. Over dinner of moussaka and salad, I'd finally convinced her to call me Aidan, not Uncle. But only after I started to call her Niece Weather, as in, niece weather we're having, don't you think? She'd giggled and finally agreed to call me Aidan. I very much liked her giggle too. Having travelled for 13 hours to get from Illinois to here, she was beat. I'd shown her to her room, small as it was, and where the bathroom was, and left. A couple of Mythos beers later, and I too had retired. I had to admit I was charmed by her. I could feel it in my chest, a vague aching feeling when I looked at her, a visceral reaction. Maybe it wouldn't be too bad having her near. Maybe I'd survive her. Sleep finally rolled in. I succumbed, tired from emotional stress. In her room, Weather lay in bed, too tired to sleep, if that were possible. She was still buzzing inside, still confused with her reaction to Uncle Aidan, or Aidan as he insisted she call him. She'd never found any guy so strongly attractive. Why was it so hard to keep her eyes off him? And even when she did, she was acutely conscious of his presence, sensing him, wanting to look, to study him. Why? But his smile and those eyes, wow, and he seemed so casual and relaxed, so at ease. It was as if he had nothing to prove, so unlike the boys she knew. He laughed so easily and didn't seem to be trying to be, unlike the boys at home. Gradually sleep crept in, eyelids drooping. Her final thought was perhaps it wouldn't be so bad to be here. Sun beat down from another almost cloudless sky. The breeze made it deceptively temperate. I knew Sun was going to burn Weather. Over the last 2 weeks I had slowly fallen under Weather's spell. It was hard not to. She was perfectly charming. Alexis had done a spectacular job at raising her. I found myself enjoying her company like no other person I'd ever met. Weather had a fascinating mix of innocent naivete and worldly awareness, probably because of Alexis. At 14, Weather still exuded a rambunctiousness I associated with childhood, a joie de vivre, a contagious enjoyment of the simplest of things. Yet she had a developing maturity, a deeper side. I'd spot it in her behaviour, how she moved, tilted her head, or ran her hand through her short silky hair. I experienced it with her sharply insightful questions as we watched the international news every night, sitting side by side on the couch. I was really quite taken with her. She was going to be a devastating woman one day. She was already a pretty devastating girl. Watching her at the bow of my once fishing boat, a 32-foot wooden Greek trawler-style boat painted white with a blue hull, the wind fluffing her short hair, I had to smile. In a white polo shirt and light blue cargo-style shorts, she looked as if she was supporting the Greek colours. It wouldn't take much for her skin to darken and tan either, if it didn't burn first. "Put more sunblock on," I yelled through open portholes from inside the pilot house. Weather waved back at me, smiled and started applying sunscreen lotion to her exposed arms and legs, bending to rub it over slender thighs and down her calves. One hand shot out to steady herself against a raised cargo hold cover when we crested a wave, the boat quartering and moving in a slight corkscrew motion as we rounded the headland of Thracia. I'd offered to take her out to see some of the outlying islands and packed a picnic. We planned to anchor in the cove of a small island, Nisida Stroglio, and swim in the deep, cool waters if she wanted. I was so preoccupied with watching Weather, I failed to anticipate the complex crossing waves. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it approach, too late for me to take corrective action. The rogue wave hit the side of our bow at an odd angle, the boat shuddering before shaking it off. Spray was tossed into the air, and a curtain of salty seawater cascaded over the bow. I watched it slap into Weather, knocking her back a few steps and drenching her from head to foot. She screamed at the unexpected cold dousing. Dripping, looking drowned, she turned towards me, shock and indignation on her pretty face. I was hit, a mallet smashing into my chest, stealing my breath away. Weather's white polo shirt had become translucent. A delicate little lace bra had appeared underneath. Plastered to her body as it was, the polo shirt accentuated perfect small breasts rising from her slender chest. The outline of her lacy bra added a sexiness to her that I reacted to on a visceral level, my penis awakening at the alluring sight. Her shorts were plastered to her, hugging her crotch, outlining a very full pubis and what looked like the elastic of her panties. I gulped, trying to draw oxygen back into my lungs. When I looked at her expression of shock, I had to grin. Damn, she looked so cute I wanted to go and hug her. And then, when she saw my grin, she frowned at my apparent amusement, and that made her look even cuter. It was like falling off a cliff, the ground under me disappearing. A sense of vertigo hit. I found Weather more attractive than anyone I had ever met. Ever. I felt the attraction in my pants and my chest, a yearning ache. Then she looked down and saw her condition. Arms immediately crossed her chest, hiding her bra. She glared at me as I laughed, just too cute for words, a gorgeous drowned rat. "It's not funny." "Yes, it is." "No, it's not. And it's frigging cold." Another wave took us both by surprise, rocking the boat violently. Weather, arms windmilling, trying to retain her balance, went flying with a screech. Shocked, I watched her tumble over the side and disappear from view. Panic hit. Shoving the throttle to off and cutting the engine and spinning the helm, I raced to the gunwale. She was flopping around 8 feet away and drifting. I didn't hesitate. I didn't even think. I dived in. Fuck. It was shockingly cold after the radiant heat of the sun. Swimming fast, I reached her. She was treading water, watching me with a puzzled expression, eyebrows knit. "What did you do that for?" she asked. "I didn't. The wave just hit," I replied, confused and surprised to see her quite calm. "I didn't even see it." "No, not the wave. Why did you dive in?" "To save you. Why do you think?" "But I can swim." "Well, I didn't know that," I exclaimed, treading water, foot-high swells lifting and lowering us. If I had, I would have stayed in the boat. Weather stared at me. A grin appeared. She nodded. Maybe you should have. Look. I turned and just about had a heart attack. My boat had drifted about 40 feet away and was moving further with each passing swell, caught in the current. Fuck me. I started swimming, a hard crawl, my heart pounding. Eventually, I overhauled the wayward boat. Eventually, I steered it over to haul Weather out of the sea. She was laughing at me. I was not impressed. It could have easily been a complete disaster. I glared at her, frowning. Where the hell was your life jacket? I asked. Now I was thinking again. She grinned at me. There. A regal finger pointed. Where the hell was yours? She asked cheekily. Then, when she caught me staring at her lacy bra, her arm quickly covered herself again. Stop staring. I wasn't. Yes, you were. I wasn't. Okay, I was. I smiled. You've got boobs. Her peal of laughter was a pure delight, making me feel warm inside. Weather laughed and felt her nipples tighten up even more. Aiden's staring, while at first embarrassing, suddenly felt good. His eyes seemed to grow so wide and his smile took her breath away. He was soaked head to foot, light brown sun-bleached hair plastered to his forehead, polo shirt plastered to his chest and sexy eyes glittering with pleasure. In that moment, Aiden was sexy. Her uncle was sexy. She shivered, but not from cold. He'd ogled her boobs. Aiden had ogled her boobs. How nice was that? He suddenly turned and yanked out a blanket from a storage locker in the pilot house, handing it to her. You're cold, he said, watching her from inside the pilot house. She didn't bother telling him that wasn't why she was shivering, or why her nipples were so hard. Wrapping the blanket around her shoulders, she sat down on a bench. Now, with the warmth of the blanket, she started feeling cold. I need to change out of these wet things, she said. Okay. Good idea. Well? Well, what? Weather grinned. You've got to leave the pilot house so I can change. Or would you rather I change in the open? When he didn't immediately respond, she giggled, blushing. Damn. Why did she blush so much around him? Okay. As much as I suddenly wanted Weather to change on the open deck, I tied the helm down so we'd putter along in a circle and stepped out, closing the pilot house door behind me. Watching the horizon, lost in thought, I didn't hear Weather emerge. I was consumed with how, from an accident, my complete perspective had changed. I knew I'd found Weather charmingly attractive as a young girl. But I had no idea I'd find her sexy and desirable. A 14-year-old sexy? Why? Yet, it was an uncontrollable, visceral attraction. I could still feel my partially erect penis heavy in my shorts. I could still picture every tiny detail of her lacy bra. I could still feel the amazement at how shapely her small breasts were. I could still see the very strong resemblance to Alexis in her face. I had no control at all, no say in how I was reacting, and that made it quite unnerving. It was, in fact, slightly terrifying finding Weather sexually attractive. All done, Weather announced, opening the pilot house door. Huh? She laughed. I'm changed, thanks. I turned. Fuck me. Weather had put on a bikini, a blue bikini, a small bikini, little strings holding bits of blue cloth, strings knotted into bows on naked hips, and at the nape of her neck, and behind her back. I ogled expanses of smooth, naked young skin without realizing it until she giggled. I shut my mouth. You're staring, she said. Damn right I was. That little thing should have been illegal. No, I'm not. I'm observing. That's different. Nope, staring. That's definitely a stare, she responded with a tinkle of pleased laughter. When I realized what I was doing, carefully absorbing every surprisingly sexy curve and swell of her adolescent beauty, I had to mentally shake myself. Tearing my eyes away from a spectacularly gorgeous, slender body, I looked at her. The grin and blush on her was beautiful, beautiful. I felt the ground below me fall away again. For some reason I wanted to hug her, draw her close. I had some very adult thoughts tumble through my mind unbidden, especially thoughts involving those little bows and my lips, before sanity returned. Weather's charm and allure was a storm assaulting me. Right, so, picnic? I asked, turning away and giving myself a brisk mental shake. No, more like a kick in the proverbial pants. Yup, I'm hungry. We'll make for the island. 20 minutes, I think. You should put some sunscreen on, I advised. Kay, I'm gonna sunbathe a bit to warm up. Piloting the boat towards a distant island, I was unaware of my shivering body, polo shirt and shorts still soaking wet. Through the forward open portholes I watched Weather moving about, laying her wet clothes over the raised foredeck. I was inordinately hypnotized by her small white cotton panties when she carefully placed them out to dry. No matter where I looked, they were all I saw, little white things. Why were they so fascinating? Eventually, shaking myself, I became distracted by Weather rubbing sunscreen on her body, a sensual act that quite riveted me. I wondered what it would be like to take those strings tied in bows at her sides, the ones that held her bikini bottoms on, and tugging them, slowly unravelling the bow, seeing them fall, those little triangles of cloth over her front and rear falling away to reveal. How much longer, Aiden? For what? Till we get there. How would I know? You're piloting the boat. Oh, right. I glanced away from her and made a quick slight adjustment so we wouldn't hit the island, as we seemed about to do. 5 minutes. Kay, I'm hungry. Me too. But not for food. Shoot. What was wrong with me? I felt like I was a teenager again with a sudden crush. I had a feeling Weather could become a dangerous obsession. 7 minutes later I dropped anchor, the boat gently rocking in the lee of the island, midday sun beating down strong and hot. There was absolutely no breeze at all. Lunch, crusty bread, hard and soft cheeses, dried cured meats, a variety of fresh fruit and drinks, Coke for Weather, and Mythos beer for me, was well received. But as we chatted about Santorini and Greece, I couldn't help the feelings that were growing inside me. Weather took a final sip of her Coke. Oops, excuse me, she said after inadvertently burping, her hand covering her grinning mouth, a blush hot on her cheeks. She could feel perspiration trickling down both her back and under her boobs, the sun punishingly hot. Through lunch she'd had a hard time concentrating on what Aiden was saying. His startlingly sexy eyes and easy smile were so distracting. Once he'd changed into a bathing suit and slouched back against the gunwale, she'd been able to study his body for the first time. And she did, intently. He was lanky, just as she'd thought. He carried not 1 ounce of fat, not one, and she surreptitiously checked every inch of him. His physique was lean like a marathon runner, muscles clearly showing, but not big or overdeveloped. Based solely on his physique, she would have expected Aiden to move with feline grace and fluidity. Yet, he didn't. Every so often he'd stumble, or hit his leg against something, grunt and swear lightly, rubbing himself before continuing. As they ate, she saw all the discoloured bruises from his clumsiness, a dark grouping of splotches on his shins, some old and fading, some new. And then she looked at his face again, her heart fluttering uncontrollably. She frowned at the feeling, annoyed with her seeming lack of control. She saw him smile at her frown and she flushed, warm, cheeks heated. There was a very, very attractive quality to Uncle Aiden that she didn't understand in the least. He seemed to be able to touch her deep inside with just a look. He could steal her breath with a smile or youthful grin. And looking into his eyes made her lose time. Why? Let's swim, she exclaimed, jumping up, needing to move. Maybe cool water would help. The sun was heading towards the horizon by the time we tied up at the dock in Amudi, the harbour below Oya. Weather was sunburned, although she didn't know it. I saw the signs, rosy red shoulders and knees. With the picnic backpack thrown over one shoulder, I held out my hand for Weathers. Taking her hand, we set off. It was a long serpentine road climbing over 800 feet to town. We walked in comfortable silence. I liked holding her hand. I only wished I was at peace too. But I wasn't. So much had changed in me, and all in one afternoon. We passed occasional residents. I greeted them, nodding with familiarity at many I knew and returning their smiles of welcome. "What did you say to them?" Weather asked. "Kalispera means good afternoon. I said hello to the other man, Yasu," giving her the phonetic sounds. Weather tried the words on her tongue, repeating them to get familiar with them. It made me grin. She had no idea how people were smiling at her as she practiced, repeating them over and over, eyes turned down to the steep road as we climbed steadily higher. Watching a 14-year-old repeating good afternoon and hello over and over to the road was very cute. By the time we were entering Oya, Weather was happily saying Yasu to everyone. By the time we were eating dinner on the balcony, enjoying the cooling evening air, the hustle and bustle of the town quieting as stores closed, and a small lantern casting a flickering yellow light over our balcony table, I knew I was falling for her. And not an uncle type of love either. Weather was quite spectacularly pretty, her short-feathered, dark chestnut hair sort of spiky, as if it had been carefully brushed that way in a high-end salon. As night fell, her steel-grey eyes had darkened and softened into a warmer, putty-like grey. Her sun-burnished cheeks glowed, her smile hurt. I let her have half a glass of a local red wine with our meal of yogurt-marinated grilled lamb with roasted rosemary potatoes and watched as she ate with gusto. "Will you teach me?" she asked out of nowhere. "Of course. Teach you what?" "To cook." Bright eyes twinkled at me, my heart fluttering. "Geez. Sure. We'll start tomorrow morning with how to boil water. Once you master that, in, a couple of weeks, we'll move on to the more challenging, how to boil eggs." Weather paused, tilting her head, fork halfway to her mouth as she considered Aidan's response. She could feel a smile tugging at her, but she also felt something else tugging at her as she studied his gorgeous eyes that seemed to have darkened. She let the smile out, but whatever the other thing was, it felt heavy in her chest. "I'll try real hard, I promise," she said. "Want to bet I can learn how to turn the stove on in one lesson?" She loved his grin, boyish and handsome. That night, Weather lay in bed and replayed each memory from the day. She smiled to herself, feeling warm at the memory of Aidan staring at her wet shirt. She remembered his surprise at seeing her boobs, how he stared as if only now registering she was a female, his eyes so big. She shivered slightly. Weather wondered what it would be like to kiss that smile, press her mouth to those sexy lips. She felt arousal bloom. Trembling, she gently caressed her boobs, tweaking her nipples, feeling a delicious ache of arousal grow in her groin. She wondered if kissing Aidan would be different from kissing Barry, the furtive kiss he'd given her after the movie. She wondered what Aidan's hands would feel like on her back, her thigh, maybe touching her down there. Weather squirmed and squeezed her legs together. She rolled onto her side and curled up, her nipples pleasantly aching. Sleep arrived, dreams following closely behind, Aidan holding her gently, pulling her to his lean body, sexy eyes looking down at her. Dreams of a kiss made her moan in her sleep. Dreams of loving whispers and of soft declarations of love dampened her panties. Weather dreamed with a smile on her face. I lay on my front with my erection pressed to the mattress and castigated myself. It was simply unacceptable. It was so wrong. I could feel the anger in me, anger at myself. I could feel my erection too, rigid, throbbing. What would Alexis think? Would she shoot me on sight? Groaning, I rolled onto my back, my erection tenting the soft white cotton sheet. I resisted grabbing it, even though my need was rather desperate. I battled an epic battle, desire fighting common sense. But gradually, as I remembered and admonished, Common sense slowly took the upper hand and the fever of need eased. Slowly, resolve returned. Slowly, I found the strength to dominate my more basal desires. I assuaged myself with the thought that loving Weather platonically was good enough for me. Having her with me for the next 5 months was a precious gift, one I'd never expected. I should relish it. I would relish it. Sleep took a long, long time to arrive. Despite my resolve, despite the best of intentions, it seemed as if Weather was waging a war on my commitment. Over the next 2 weeks, she seemed to invade my world. I became hyper-aware of her wherever she was. I noticed how she always walked around in bare feet and how she'd painted her toenails light pink, not her fingernails though. Why? She seemed to exit the bathroom whenever I was headed towards it, too often wrapped in a towel and giving me a heart-stopping smile. All yours. I noticed her short hair, damp and dark, picked up the scent of floral shampoo as she passed in the narrow hall and turning, how long, slender and youthfully firm her bare legs were. I couldn't stop myself from wondering what it might be like to see that towel unravel and fall. What would a naked 14-year-old butt look like? I became fascinated by her right foot. She'd curl it up under her when sitting at the dining table or on the balcony chair, and, as she ate, her toes would wiggle, just on her right foot though. Why? It seemed the more she liked a particular dish, the more her toes would move. I watched how her mouth and lips moved as she talked or ate. I loved how her lips curled slightly, as if on the cusp of bursting into a radiant smile or a sparkling laugh, a promise to brighten my heart. I was acutely aware of Weather as she moved, like a cat, smoothly, and how her t-shirt seemed to drape over her small boobs, and, once or twice, I was quite convinced from the way they jiggled under soft sky-blue cotton when she laughed that she was burlesque. I couldn't stop the erection that formed. And then she'd wear those little terry shorts that emphasised the sweet swell of her compact bottom and the delectable shape of her small buttocks, and I'd feel my pants get tight in appreciation. She'd look at me, watchful, beautiful steel grey eyes twinkling at me, as if she knew what I was thinking and found it amusing. I admonished myself. I fought. I swore. And one fateful night as I lay in bed, almost 6 weeks after she entered my life, I held my erection and let my mind take flight. I let images of Weather flood in. Wet shirt, lacy bra, petite breasts. I remembered a skimpy bikini, laces tied at the side, acres of bare skin and small triangles of cloth, not hiding her modesty at all. I let images flood in as I stroked my aching erection and imagined what her hidden charms might look like. What a naked 14-year-old body would look like. Thinking of holding her delicate breast and feeling the inside of her slender thigh, I let my guard down and masturbated to a strong, strong orgasm. Guilt rushed in to erase the sweet pleasure. I condemned my weakness and renewed my commitment to behave. I also slept badly. Weather's eyes popped open, morning light brightening her room. It was as if her mind had been working through the night. She saw the intricately carved old ebony dark chest of drawers, the chair with her clothes from yesterday draped over the back of it. From below she heard the crash of a pot or pan falling to the floor, followed by a string of curses. She smiled at Aidan's swearing. With some people they'd say the most innocuous swear word and somehow it would sound dirty and make your skin crawl. With others, like Aidan, they could swear up a storm and it was nothing but funny. For almost 6 weeks now she'd lived with Aidan, the first male she'd ever lived with. She'd never known her father, long gone before she was born. Mum had never married, telling her she was happy with Weather and didn't need more. She'd refused to talk about her father, no matter how Weather probed. Mum had no boyfriends either, at least none that she'd ever seen, even though Mum was still young. But living with her uncle was so different. Maybe it was because of the closeness dictated by his cute house, or the immediate comfort she'd felt with him, or because he was so gently sexy and considerate and kind. Maybe it was because of the almost constant attention he'd paid to her, or those sexy, expressive eyes that seemed to be hardwired to her heart. Maybe it was because she'd felt an immediate pull. From the first time she'd set eyes on him, it seemed as if she knew him. From the first time her eyes had settled on him in the airport, his hands shoved into his back jean pockets. Lanky, tall, and completely at ease, she'd felt her heart ache, her chest heavy. Whatever it was, when she woke up she knew, beyond doubt, she loved him. More than that, he made her feel special, attractive, beautiful, and made her tingle with pleasure. He filled her with warmth and security and love. He wrapped his irresistible personality around her, making her feel special and wanted and even desirable. She wanted to kiss him. She wanted Aidan to hug her, touch her, caress her, and sweep her off her feet. Springing from bed, weather-dressed and hit the bathroom, blushing at some of the sexy thoughts passing through her mind. Descending the stairs, she stood at the archway to the kitchen watching Aidan as he cooked. He looked good in the navy blue t-shirt and khaki shorts, legs bare, feet bare. His t-shirt hung on him, as if it was made of the softest cotton, draping off his shoulders, hanging loose at his trim waist. Idly, she wondered if she could steal it for herself. Maybe she'd offer to do the laundry and grab it. With a smile, she decided she'd just raid his bedroom dresser and find one that smelled of him. Then Aidan swore up a storm, a carton of eggs hitting the terracotta floor with a noisy splat. Broken white shells, yellow yolk and thick egg whites splattered over the kitchen floor. Twisting to stare at the disaster on the floor, an attractive frown on his face as if affronted by the eggs, like they'd deliberately fallen to annoy him, the frying pan in his hand swept across the counter. An orange juice carton went flying, the plastic cap bursting off as it hit the tiled floor, orange juice spurting out to join the eggs. Fudge bugger, damn! Weather burst into laughter. Gorgeous soft eyes turned to her. What exactly are you laughing at, young lady? You! Has anyone ever told you you're a klutz? She asked with another snort of laughter. I am not. I can't help it if the egg carton was slippery. Weather grinned at his indignation. So, what about the orange juice carton, or all those bruises? What bruises? Those. She nodded at his legs. On your shins. Wow, how did I get those? Weather laughed. He was such a kid at times. Aidan, you hit anything within 20 feet of you. No, I don't. Okay. She smiled. Within the hour, she bet he'd be swearing at having run into some piece of furniture with his knee, toe, or shin. He was worse than a blind man. She'd never have guessed this was his home the way he seemed so unfamiliar with it. Let me help clean up. With a final bite of perfectly fried eggs, a last bite of freshly baked baguette sopped in egg yolk, and a sip of naturally sweet orange juice, all freshly bought, Weather sighed and leaned back from the small dining table. Aidan, despite being a goofy klutz, was a spectacular cook, far better than Mom. Good breakfast? She nodded. She liked how he smiled with pride. Very nice. It pleased me how she seemed to enjoy my cooking. I'd thought young girls were either picky eaters or had the appetites of anorexic chickadees, not Weather. I wasn't quite sure where all the nutrition was going given how slender she was. Maybe it was her personality burning all the calories. Nevertheless, I liked the gusto she showed when eating. I've got to work this morning, Weather, I said. What are you going to do? I thought I'd wander around town, maybe try my Greek, she replied. Good. Just remember not to swear accidentally. Enunciation, I advised with a smile. She'd shocked several locals when accidentally mispronouncing one word and denigrated their mothers. How about I meet you for lunch? Great. Can we try uzeri? Sure. I felt her smile in my chest, a tightening feeling. She was truly a beautiful girl. She was also gradually working her way through every restaurant in town. Weather wandered aimlessly through Oya, enjoying the hustle and bustle, the noise and busy shops. She liked the way the town smelled, in parts salty from the sea, in parts fishy from the docks, and then suddenly strong aromas of cooking lamb, or spicy scents of Greek dishes assaulting her, mouth-wateringly appetizing. She liked how the people seemed so friendly, smiling at her, nodding greetings, grinning at her Greek. She liked how they didn't seem to care if their clothes weren't the latest fashion. Work pants and white shirts for the men, calf-length dark-coloured dresses for the women, some with scarves covering their hair. These Greeks were loud and vociferous and full of life. They made her smile. To her, Oya was unpretentious, so unlike home. She liked the winding lanes that followed no perceivable pattern, so different from the boring ruler-straight, rectilinear grid pattern of streets back home. Despite the intense brightness of a burning sun reflecting off whitewashed houses, she liked how cute they were, so much smaller than what she was used to. In fact, everything was smaller in Oya. Remembering Aidan's comment at the airport, "Small is almost always better," she smiled. He was right. Oya was picture card perfect, a white dazzling jewel hanging on the edge of a cliff over sapphirine water. Greeks liked colour too. It showed in the women's scarves and the proliferation of vivid blooming plants that seemed to fill window boxes everywhere. It was, she decided, the most charming town she'd ever seen, and as she wandered the streets she felt at home. That surprised her. No school, no friends, no shopping mall, no cinema, no Starbucks, no cell phone, no text messaging. So how come? Glancing at her swatch, she saw it was close to 1 o'clock. Stopping and glancing around, she oriented herself and set off for Uzeri. She was beginning to feel hungry. I sat at the outdoor patio at Uzeri waiting for weather, a bottle of Assertico dry white wine sitting in an ice bath waiting for me. My mind was occupied. This morning, Weather had begun to break through carefully constructed defences with her bright laughter, her giggles, her sharp wit. My resolve of last night had bent under the assault of her charm and personality. When I'd finally been alone sitting at my desk, an old, scarred, dark, wood-topped desk with intricate, woven black iron legs, staring at a 27-inch monitor, I'd found myself lost. Computer code that, for my entire adult life, had sung to me like perfect arias, allowing me to create hugely popular programs for PCs, Macs, and iPads, and provided a lucrative income, sat staring at me in defiance on the monitor, laughing at me. For the first time in my life, computer code looked like metaphorical Greek to me, unintelligible. I was struggling, and I knew it. For almost 6 weeks, Weather had charmed me, enchanted me, and beguiled me. She was a perfect blend of intelligence and growing maturity, offset by the incredible attractiveness of carefree youth, a bubbly personality, deeply attractive giggles, and the amazing, glorious promise of adolescence. But she was also... Her waving hand pulled me from my thoughts. Her bright, bright smile made my lips curl in automatic response. And as Weather approached along the narrow sidewalk, I felt a tremor of fear return when startlingly beautiful steel-grey eyes twinkled at me. I'd been strong for so long, yet faced with Weather, I was a puppy with no resolve, just wanting to please her. She was dangerously appealing to me. "This town is just amazing, Aidan," Weather enthused as she pulled out the metal patio chair, sitting and rearranging the cutlery. She grabbed the white cloth serviette and shook it out, covering her lap. "Can I try some wine?" she asked, spotting the bottle. "Is it Greek?" Without waiting for an answer, she picked up her wine glass and held it out. I was drowning. I took a deep breath, a fortifying breath. "Better." "Sure," I said, pulling the cold bottle from the battered pewter wine cooler. I poured for us both, watching as Weather gazed around her with a smile of pleasure, caught sight of a menu, grabbed it, and after taking a sip of the dry white wine and passing judgment, opened the menu to select her meal. I caught myself again. I was wondering when she was going to behave like my preconception of a teenage girl. This creature across from me, this girl my sister had raised, was simply amazing, I thought. "What's calamari?" she asked. "It's squid." "Oh, yuck!" she exclaimed with a scrunch of her face. "I think I'll skip that." "What's clef tico?" "It's lamb marinated in garlic and lemon juice and slow roasted on the bone." "Ooh, yum. I'll have that," Weather stated with satisfaction, laying the menu down, eyes returning to scan the patio and busy street, eyes twinkling with enjoyment. We ordered, my lunch a light Greek salad. I wasn't hungry. I was far too busy staring at the angel across from me. With the memory of water slamming into her on the boat and what it revealed, I was now acutely conscious of Weather's youthful sensuality, made more intense by her personality. I now noticed how her small breasts gave her t-shirt a seductive shape. I noticed the fine hair on her unshaved arms, and how in the glare of the sun, her short, feathery chestnut hair seemed to flash with reddish highlights. I noticed how her eyebrows were unshaped, full, yet giving her a sensually intense look that, with her youth, seemed even more attractive. I noticed how incredibly long and thick her eyelashes were, how lovely they were as she blinked, and how large her pretty eyes were. As we leisurely consumed a second bottle of wine, Weather providing a funny running commentary on other patrons and passing pedestrians, and afternoon slowly passing into late afternoon and then early evening, I noticed how her nose flared gently, and how agile and animated her mouth was, lips so full. I wondered what they'd feel like to kiss and got an erection. Then we strolled through town after leaving the restaurant, and early evening gradually yielded to dusk, putting on a spectacular sunset of reds, yellows, and golds. I was acutely aware of how Weather graced me with her attention, how she held my arm with both of her hands, our hips bumping occasionally. I was very conscious of her small breast pressed to my arm. In the dying flames of the red and gold sun as it plummeted below the horizon, departing with a final spectacular flare, in the magic of the Greek islands, and under the gentle suppressing influence of too much wine, despite my best efforts, I fell in love with one of the most charming, most beautiful people I'd ever met. And when we stood side by side looking at the harbour below us alone, Greek fishing boats bobbing in the swells, seagulls circling, a breeze finally breaking the heat, and darkness shrouded us, when Weather looked at me, her fingers intertwining through mine, and soft eyes glittering with pleasure. "It's so beautiful, Aidan." I did what I'd been thinking about since she walked into Uzuri. I bent and kissed her gently. It was a chaste kiss, lips touching lips, but it was anything but innocent. Weather's lips were soft against mine, warm and silky. I shuddered at how sensual the kiss was. I drowned in the surprise in her eyes. I died at her soft smile afterwards, her little blush, and how she held my arm, resting her cheek on it and seared. She was beautiful, gorgeous. The magic of the Greek Isles had hit. Weather said nothing as we strolled home. She held my arm tight. Weather felt like she was walking on a cloud. Aidan had kissed her. And God, it was such a perfect kiss, soft and loving. She'd melted at the look in his eyes, the adoration she'd seen and even desire. It had shaken her to her core. Never in her life had she known a simple kiss could be so amazing. It wasn't like any of the other furtive or over-enthusiastic kisses she'd had. Her lips tingled. Her body ached. She was in love. She couldn't stop looking up at him as they walked home, Aidan so handsome, his smile so sexy. He kissed me. She was in a fog, isolated from life around her. Sounds of cars, horns, and town life were muted. It stayed that way for the rest of the evening. She trembled when she kissed Aidan goodnight on his lips, wishing she could sleep with him and feel him next to her, be held in his arms, be cuddled, be loved. In bed, the feelings and memories flooded back, making her ache for him. She cupped her pantied crotch, squeezing gently as she replayed the kiss, soft lips, warm lips. She trembled at the intensity in his sexy eyes, adoring eyes, heated and piercing her. Curling up on her side, her heart aching, Weather caressed herself, let arousal build gently, pussy throbbing. Her small breasts ached and grew heavy, flushed. She replayed kissing Aidan over and over. Groaning with need and desire, she caressed herself, hips responding, pussy moist, slippery, clit pulsing. Slowly, gently, Weather brought herself to an orgasm, clenching and shaking, sweet release, sweet pleasure. Aidan kissing her, Aidan kissing her, Aidan loving her, oh Aidan! In my bed, lying on my back, I battled. Weather's lips had been so soft and sexy. The adoration in her eyes had made my heart ache. God, I wanted her, so sweet and innocent, so incredibly alluring. I'd never experienced young adolescence, and when matched with her appealing personality, I was lost. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to sweep her up in my arms and hug her, hold her to me. I wanted to kiss her sexy mouth endlessly, kiss her chin, her cheeks, and beautiful eyes. I wanted to carry her to my bed, undress her and make love to her. My erection strained, needing attention, wanting weather. An image of Alexis intruded. Shame flooded in. "You can't, Aiden," I chastised myself. "You can't." But it was so hard, just so hard. If only weather. Groaning, I rolled over, pressing my erection into the mattress, my face into my pillow. For the first time since I was 24, I felt like crying. It was agony. The gloom of an overcast sky greeted me in the morning. Was it nature warning me? Had I been more alert and not so preoccupied, I might have taken the warning to heart. But only hindsight is 20/20. A light rain started to fall as I prepared breakfast, feeling depressed from my newfound resolve. It felt like the clouds were pressing down on my shoulders. But I was going to do the right thing. Whatever it took, I was going to do the right thing. Weather danced down the stairs, her heart singing. She'd slept well to dreams of Aiden's kiss. She'd woken to his swearing as a pot clattered to the kitchen floor, a smile breaking out. Even a dreary sky, the first she'd seen since arriving, couldn't depress her. She grinned at the sight of Aiden at the stove, bending to inspect a pancake, his light brown hair unkempt and stubble on his face. A rush of love hit her. Smiling, she went up and slipped her arms around his trim waist, hugging, resting her head on his back. "Morning," she said. She was surprised to feel him stiffen. She was stunned to feel him gently remove her arms from him. She was shocked at his remote expression and the coolness in his eyes. What happened? Yesterday he kissed her. He kissed her. And now it was as if he didn't even like her. Stepping back and away, she stared, fear creeping in. "What's wrong, Aiden?" she asked, her heart beating. She didn't like his frown, not at all. Yesterday was a mistake, Weather. I shouldn't have kissed you. We just can't. My voice trailed off. I didn't like the frown on her face, nor the hurt or betrayal that emerged for that matter. She looked at me and I missed the signs. Dark storm clouds gathering in her eyes, turning them a hard, flinty, smoky grey, and anger flashing like lightning. But I didn't miss her actions. A storm erupted. The first mug hit my chest with a painful thud. I had time to raise my arm and a plate smashed painfully into my elbow, numbing me and shattering into pieces that rained to the floor. I drew a breath to yell and a second mug caught me on my eyebrow, warm blood flowing. You, she screamed at me. Her voice suddenly faded away. Tears welled in her enchanting eyes before she turned and stormed out of the kitchen. I heard her run up the stairs, a bedroom door slam. Jesus Christ, what a temper. I'd never suspected it. She'd been so even-keeled since arriving. Maybe it was a girl thing, I thought, holding a dish towel to my eye. Rain started falling. Gusting wind arrived, splattering rain against kitchen windows and balcony doors as they rattled. I was quite immobile, my mind churning. In my mind's eye, I saw dark, flinty grey eyes flashing anger at me. Beautiful eyes that suddenly glistened with unshed tears, disappointment and hurt. The image made my heart ache, made me flush with shame. Seeing Weather go from such a radiantly happy girl to one so hurt made me feel like a shit. It destroyed me, tearing me apart. What had I done? How could I? What I should have done was sit on the couch and wait her out. What I should have done was wait for her to emerge and explain everything. Make her understand just how wrong that incredible kiss was. I should have been honest. But I didn't. What I did was slowly take a first leaden step, then another and another, gradually gaining pace and conviction. I discarded rational thought and let my emotions guide me. I let the intense attraction I had for Weather lead. And all too soon, I was standing in front of her bedroom door, my knuckle gently tapping. "Weather." "Go away." I didn't. "Please, Weather." "Go away, Aiden." And so I didn't. I opened a door instead. Weather was sitting on the edge of her bed. Her soft grey eyes, full of the pain of rejection, lanced into me. My body actually shook. The utter sadness on her face felt like an ice pick in my heart. Big eyes brimmed and a single tear fell, taking my breath away. Wind gusted, rattling the window, rain hitting glass like small hard peas. Nature either warning me or chastising me. I should have waited. I should have explained. I didn't. The utter need to make her smile at me, to look at me like she had before I'd ruined everything, was all that mattered. It was an imperative. I moved into her room, sat next to her, the mattress yielding. I drew her stiff body into my side, my face finding her hair. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I was wrong." I felt Weather physically melt into me. Her hands rested on my arm and thigh. She tilted her head against my chest and sighed. My heart broke. Rational thought took flight. Desire and love of this 14-year-old sweet girl clouded my brain. An index finger found her chin. It turned her spectacularly pretty face up. I drowned in her enchanting eyes so full of love and longing and forgiveness. Bending, my lips touched hers. I heard her quietly moan. Her eyes closed slowly. I felt her arm slip up to reach around my neck. She partially turned to me. A sense of vertigo overcame me. I felt lightheaded. And then the tip of a small, warm tongue, hesitantly, shyly touched my lips. Walls crumbled. I heard my moan and felt the earth tremble. God, Weather's kiss was so sweetly sexual. Her tongue was so hesitantly arousing. I pulled her tighter and let myself respond, my tongue tip touching hers in greeting, encouraging, welcoming. It was as if the dam burst. Weather moaned and turned, straddling my lap, both arms wrapping around my neck, and her mouth opened, head tilted, and I tasted her, probing into her mouth. She groaned and chased my tongue back into my mouth. It was a fantastic kiss, full of sensual promise, hot yet sweet. Holding Weather, such an attractive girl, and French kissing her was intensely thrilling. I had a raging erection from her kiss, one of the most exciting kisses I'd ever experienced. Eventually, I ended it and hugged her slender body to me. "I'm sorry," I murmured into her hair again. I felt her sigh deeply, her whole body shuddering, snuggling into me. "So okay, Aidan," she said softly. "Then good. Let's get breakfast." It wasn't really what I wanted to do. I actually had some rather amorous and sexy ideas that involved us getting naked slowly. It seemed my hesitancy and worry had evaporated, and a very, very nice feeling of freedom had replaced them. But still, she was 14. Tumbling into bed wasn't quite appropriate. Some damage control was called for. A bit of seduction was an exciting prospect. Weather positively glowed as we made breakfast together. With my arms around her from behind, I showed her how to gently spread the omelette mixture in the frying pan, my hands guiding hers. I let her try it on her own and held her stomach. She was doing quite well too, until my hands sneaked up, reaching for a not-so-subtle grope of small boobs. Her body jerked as if hit by electricity. "Hey!" A partially cooked omelette went spilling from the pan onto the stove and floor. I apologised with a grin, not feeling sorry in the least. Her breasts and small bra were very, very attractive. I wanted to see rather badly, and explore, and feel, and maybe taste. I didn't. A new omelette was mixed, and as I cleaned the previous one off the stove and floor, Weather happily cooked. "Behave, Aiden," she admonished with a grin of pure delight when I accidentally stroked a soft bare leg. With a giggle as my hand moved up, she twisted away. I halted my journey when the omelette pan rattled rather loudly. However, I paid no heed to her order. I didn't behave in the slightest. Through breakfast, I tried to grope Weather gently. She positively radiated pleasure at my attention, smiling, blushing at times, laughing and dancing away from me only to let me catch her again and almost feel. I basked in her pleasure and playfulness. It was addictive. Anticipation was intensely exciting. Then, as the storm passed and rain ended, and afternoon sun broke through to dry the island, we went shopping for dinner. Weather danced away. Again. "Stop already! Geez, Aiden!" she exclaimed, her heart fluttering. And contrary to her words, she hoped he wouldn't. "Ouch! Hey!" She couldn't stop the giggle as she rubbed her butt, smarting from his pinch. Weather loved his attention. She loved it. After the heartbreak that morning, after the hug and another spectacular kiss, he suddenly seemed to change. Aiden became a flirtatious octopus. Like a kid, he touched, groped and grinned, his sexy eyes twinkling with mischief and pleasure. It made her heart race. As morning had turned into afternoon and the storm passed, sun breaking up the clouds, Aiden only had eyes for her. He seemed to drown her in love and attention, and she adored it, absolutely adored it. She loved him. It was an ache in her heart she felt even when she was laughing or giggling, which she seemed to be doing a lot of suddenly. "Hey, behave, the shop's right there and there are people everywhere." She blushed. God, what if people had seen him squeeze her ass? His innocent grin and the pleasure in his eyes made her melt. Aiden was a hunk. Shopping with Aiden was interesting. When it came to food, he was quite serious, a real gourmand, showing her what to look for in fresh vegetables and fruits. She absorbed his lecture on meats, although there were too many cuts of lamb for her to follow. In the store he behaved, but she saw the twinkle in his eye, mischief never far away. And, like a kid, he resumed right where he left off when they headed back home. "Here, take these," he said, handing her a couple of shopping bags. When she took them, he nodded. Good. It didn't register at first, but with both hands now carrying bags, she was helpless to stop him. She giggled and twisted away as a hand caressed her jean-covered rear. She gasped and quickly looked around when he tried to slip his hand inside her jeans to feel her butt. "Don't! Someone will see!" When he made a play for her breasts, she stopped walking suddenly and tried to cover herself. Her breasts ached and felt flushed. She felt her pussy clench too, moisture leaking into her panties. Damn! Blushing, she yelled at him, "Stop! Jeez, Aiden!" "What?" A giggle escaped at his attempted innocent expression. What a goof! She tried to look angry. Her body was aching and she was as horny as hell. It wasn't fair. Then it struck her. Hold on. This could work both ways. Smiling sweetly at him, she placed the shopping bags on the sidewalk. "All yours." She walked off, crossing the street to avoid going near him. She grinned at his yell. Several yards later, she waited. His grumbling and frown made her laugh. It was like she'd taken his favourite toy away from him. Huh. How about that? Her. Pleased beyond reason, Weather let him lead the way home, watching his trim butt in jeans. She wondered what it looked like. How firm would it be? A shiver shook her. Reaching out, she grinned and pinched. "Excuse me, young lady." She loved his pretend indignation, her heart aching so much. That evening, as we sat on the balcony, I asked, "Do you know your toes wiggle when you eat?" Humidity had been burned away in the afternoon by the return of an intense hot Aegean sun. Now, with nightfall, the sounds of music and laughter floating at us from the tavern, I was watching pink toenails wiggling as Weather took another bite of homemade pasticcio, a sort of Greek lasagna consisting of a layer of cheesy, tubular pasta, topped by ground veal and lamb in a tomato sauce. topped by more pasta in a layer of bechamel cheese sauce, all baked and browned in the oven. Her toes paused, bright eyes twinkled at me. A smile appeared and then disappeared as she took a large bite of crusty bread. Good, she mumbled. I sipped a Greek red, a light-bodied local wine, and sat back in the chair. Light from the lamp on the table cast shadows over Weather, highlighting the angles and planes of her pretty face. It made her short, spiky hair seem almost black and added a smoky quality to her eyes. I studied the too big navy blue t-shirt she'd changed into. It looked familiar. With her leaning forward, she didn't show one of my favourite sights, the small, gentle mounds of adolescent breasts. "Can you lean back for a moment?" I asked, taking another sip of wine, smiling. "Why?" "Please, just for a moment. I need to check something." I liked the suspicion in her eyes. She stared at me and leaned back, one hand still holding a piece of crusty bread. Ah yes, there they were. Small twins so widely spaced, so sexy and alluring. Yes, still there. Beautiful. Thanks. A momentary look of confusion crossed her face, and then, as if clarity hit, she looked down at her chest, looked back up at me, blushed and grinned. "Like?" "Yes, indeed," I answered with a smile. "Very much so. I look forward to introducing myself to the twins." "Did you notice how, in Greece, we kiss when greeting?" Weather burst into a fit of giggles. Her cheeks flushed bright red. The large neck opening of her rather large t-shirt slipped to the side. I saw a slender white bra strap over a shoulder peek at me. It looked remarkably sexy, I thought. Cute pink painted toes started moving as Weather leaned forward and continued eating, her eyes now studying me, a smile hovering at the edge of her lips. She was so damn attractive. Her youthful sexiness and sweetness, and the personality that blazed brightly in her eyes, was incredible. With my feelings of guilt left behind in the dust this morning, I basked in the love and desire that made me ache so pleasantly, feeling a constant state of arousal and the exciting promise of discovery ahead. I knew exactly what was going to happen, and even if I wasn't going to lead the way, I knew beyond doubt Weather was going to become my lover. In hindsight, I realised it was fate, written from the moment I set eyes on her at the Santorini airport. There was arousal and passion in the air as we ate. It almost crackled. I was intensely aware of Weather, as she probably was of me. The anticipation was thrilling. But as she pushed her plate away with a groan, she crossed her arms on the table, resting her chin on them, sexy eyes looking up at me. A smile appeared. "I'm full. I ate too much." "So no dessert then?" I asked, knowing she had the biggest sweet tooth on the island. "Depends. What's for dessert?" I took a sip of wine, swallowed and smiled. "Whatever you want. Anything. Everything I have is yours." I knew she was smart, and she didn't disappoint. "Anything?" she asked slowly, drawing the word out. Man, I liked that flit of mischief, a sparkle in her eyes. It was astoundingly attractive. "Anything," I nodded. There was a slight tremor in my hand when I took another sip of wine. "Ice cream then," she declared forcefully, jumping up from the table. Damn. Not quite what I had in mind. I listened to her clattering around in the kitchen. Oops. Damn. The sound of cutlery rattling across a tile floor followed. I didn't bother getting up to clear the table. The kitchen cast a long beam of light through the open window, brightening the whitewashed balustrade at the end of the balcony and highlighting the stucco-like texture of the brickwork. I heard another crash and a cuss word, and then the fridge door being slammed closed. Her dark outline appeared, lit from behind. She moved out onto the balcony, a bowl in one hand, spoon in another, a beautiful smile on her face. Walking around, she stood at my side and nudged me with a slender hip. "Move." I turned the chair slightly, backing away from the table. Weather turned and sat in my lap sideways. She took a bite of vanilla ice cream, the chocolate sauce very, very dark. Yum. I was entranced watching her face. She smiled at me, a spoon rizzing. "Open." Like a robot, I obeyed, opening my mouth. She slipped a spoonful of ice cream in, watched me eat and swallow. Good, huh? I was treated to a sexy dessert. Weather, with her buttocks pressed into my lap and against my partial erection, proceeded to spoon-feed me dessert. 1 spoon for her, 1 spoon for me. She smiled. Her eyes twinkled at me. And then she bent, her face nearing me, and softly kissed away ice cream that had smeared at the corner of my lips. Beautiful eyes peered at me. A soft smile emerged. Chocolate, she said quietly. More? She asked, holding up her bowl. My heart clenched. Weather was seducing me. It worked. I took the bowl out of her hands and placed it blindly on the table, my gaze riveted to her. With a hand on the back of her head, I gently drew her face to me. Her lips parted slightly. They glistened. I kissed her, tasting chocolate and vanilla and Weather. Slipping an arm around her back and an arm under her knees, I stood carrying Weather, kissing her gently. She held onto my neck, turning and wiggling, her lips pressing harder. Lights were left on, dirty plates left at the table. Balcony doors were left open. The old wood floor felt cool on my feet as I carried Weather. Despite her 5 feet height, she felt petite in my arms, so light and, perhaps because of it, so desirable, a sexy kitten. My shin caught the edge of the coffee table as we kissed, making me stumble and grunt in pain. Weather giggled into my mouth, her eyes shining with laughter. So sexy. It broke the kiss. You're a klutz, she said, resting her head on my shoulder. I'm not. R2, she said softly. I'm not, I claimed quietly as I carried her, walking sideways up the narrow stairs. When I knocked her head against the bedroom doorframe, she giggled again. See? You are totally a klutz. Putting Weather down, I opened the large double windows to let the evening breeze in. My erection was tight in my jeans. I had Weather in my bedroom. I was going to see Weather naked. And even better, I was going to make love with her. I was going to make love with a 14-year-old. It was an intense, overwhelming feeling. Despite the giggles, Weather had been shaking as Aidan carried her. She knew exactly what she wanted to do. All those things that had seemed so nasty and dirty when she'd talked and giggled about them with her friends at school, now made her horny. Imagining holding Aidan's erection made her tremble. What would it be like? How big? She could even imagine herself kissing it to make Aidan feel good. And a pulse of arousal hit as she thought about actually taking Aidan into her mouth, maybe sucking him. Would he like that? If it made him happy, she'd have to try. Suddenly, the idea of seeing a penis spurting semen was sexy, not gross. Making Aidan come. Wow. God, all those nasty things now seemed sexy and arousing. Suddenly, she wanted to try them, even those really, really naughty ones. Would they hurt? With Aidan, they seemed okay and sexy and exciting. When he put her down, she stood, breasts aching, pussy throbbing, panties dampening, heart beating. She couldn't take her eyes off him as he opened the bedroom windows, moonlight behind him making him seem so big, tall, and strong. His bed loomed large in the corner of her eyes. Aidan's bed. What was she supposed to do? Was she supposed to undress? Was he supposed to undress her? Would he like that? His bed looked big, the white cover glowing in the moonlight. Was she supposed to undress Aidan? How? How did you undress someone and make it sexy and exciting? Weather stood absolutely still. Her mind was churning with indecision. As she realised just how inexperienced she was and how much she didn't know, she began to feel childish and immature. Nerves stirred in her stomach. She began to worry she wouldn't be good enough for Aidan. How could she be? She was too inexperienced. Her breasts were too small. She was a virgin. She didn't even know how to make it good for him. Fears began to worm their way in. She wasn't good enough for Aidan. He wouldn't like it. He wouldn't like her. She wouldn't satisfy him. She was just a girl, not a woman. As she experienced something close to panic blossom, Aidan turned from the window. The look in his eyes took her breath away. Like a fresh spring breeze, it blew all her worries away. Aidan looked hungry. It made her shiver. And like a deer caught in the headlights, the love and desire in his gaze held her, immobile, unable to feel her legs or arms. She trembled. All she could see was soft eyes, desire, sexy eyes drowning her. She trembled as Aidan moved close, his arms gently wrapping her in affection. She felt her nipples perk up as they pressed against her bra, Aidan's hands caressing her back, sliding down to caress her butt. Tilting her head, she held her breath as he smiled and bent. He whispered softly, "I love you, Weather." Weather relaxed, a weight lifting, his voice so full of emotion. Aidan's lips touched hers, setting off sparks of pleasure. She shuddered, eyes closing. His kiss released her. Her arms circled him. She moaned when his tongue pressed at her lips, wanting entry. She ached for him when she opened her mouth, Aidan's tongue gently probing. A flush of moisture hit her when he sucked her lower lip. When she felt his hand slip under her t-shirt, she trembled. The kiss broke, her lips feeling swollen and tingling. She stared into his sexy eyes, felt him lift the hem of her t-shirt. Smiling, Weather raised her arms for him. I'd never been so turned on by a kiss. Weather actually moaned into my mouth and melted against me, and it was without a doubt the most arousing kiss I'd ever experienced. When she raised her arms for me, encouraging me to undress her, letting me undress her, I raised her t-shirt. A slender, flat stomach appeared, followed by a small, simple, almost chaste white cotton bra hugging delectable petite breasts. In its simplicity and youthfulness, it was perhaps the sexiest bra I'd set eyes on. The t-shirt fell unnoticed to the floor as Weather stared at me, eyes expectant, shy but excited. I saw a twitch of her arms, an automatic reaction to cover herself. My hands found slender, delicate, bare shoulders. "You're absolutely gorgeous," I told her softly. "Very, very sexy, Weather." My erection strained at the sight of her young breasts held by soft white cotton, her bra so excitingly girlish. I slipped 2 narrow bra straps off her shoulders. Weather smiled and blushed but didn't move. She didn't flinch from my visual inspection, her eyes large, watching me. Perfectly charming, intensely attractive. I let my hand slip down her sides, across silky skin to rest on narrow, still boyish hips. Kneeling, I kissed her navel and saw goosebumps rise. My fingers found the brass button of her jeans. My erection ached as Weather sucked in her tummy, giving my fingers room. I opened the button, her young skin warm against the back of my hand. A zipper rasped loudly, echoing in the bedroom, followed by the exhalation of breath. Me. It was my breath rushing out as matching skimpy white cotton panties appeared in the gap, a tiny white silk bow at the waist. Weather's hand settled on my shoulders. I glanced up at her and smiled nervously, suddenly feeling a bit hesitant, almost shy. Taking her jeans off seemed so definitive. She saw my hesitation, and then she grinned at me, the first significant expression she'd had since I'd started undressing her. I liked it, a lot. "Go on," she encouraged softly. "You can take them off." She wiggled her slender hips and bum for me while supporting herself with her hands on my shoulders. I tugged. Jeans crumpled to her ankles. I stared at a sexy teenage mound pressing and stretching white cotton. I stared at a 14-year-old's pussy hugged by small panties, the elastic digging deep and accentuating a youthful plumpness, a perfect V, amazingly full and intensely arousing. Weather started shifting, raising one leg, then the other. I wasn't aware of why, but God, her pussy undulated and moved, giving me glimpses of a full vulva filling her crotch. Her pussy pressed against soft white cotton, the crease of a camel toe appearing and disappearing. My heart was racing. I'd never seen such a sexy sight. Jeans went flying from a foot. So that was what she'd been doing. For just a second, I wondered if I could put those jeans back on her and get an encore. Then, with my painful erection gently pulsing and leaking pre-cum, I held her narrow hips, pulled her full, plump, panty-covered pubis towards me and kissed it. shuddering at how my lips seemed to sink into the incredibly prominent pad. A scent hit me, light with a hint of musk, earthy. I recognized it and moaned, dizziness almost overwhelming me. Weather was aroused. It was the scent of her arousal. God help me, it was amazing. My turn. What? I looked up reluctantly. Weather smiled, excitement glistening in her eyes. It's my turn. For what? I asked, thinking only of pressing my lips back against that amazing mound, arousal and lechery fogging my mind. Weather giggled at me. I liked that too. She tugged me under my arms. Get up! But... I looked at her sexy mound and exciting panties. She giggled again, her hand pulling my face up. Stand, Aiden. It's my turn. Weather laughed at his frown. She was still tingling from his kiss on her pussy. Her panties were now really damp in the gusset, her clit aching. Aiden had looked like he was worshipping her. Her! And the heat in his eyes made her even hornier. Now she wanted to undress him. It was her turn to explore. She wanted to see his erection, see how big it was. She clenched her legs at the exciting thought. God, she wanted to make love with Aiden so bad. Bending, she kissed his lips quickly. Stand up, she ordered. She felt free all of a sudden. Her shyness and worry had evaporated when he'd kissed her pussy so lovingly. And look at that. Her hands didn't even tremble when she unbuttoned his shirt. She liked it. White, cool cotton with rolled-up sleeves like a suit shirt, she thought. Slipping it off his shoulders, she decided she might steal it too. She liked the idea of wearing Aiden's clothes. Weather draped the shirt over a chair and moved back to Aiden. Standing in front of him, her face was level with his bare chest. She combed her fingers through the light, soft chest hair and across tiny, hard nipples. The tip of her index finger traced down, across his belly button, and followed a line of baby soft hair that disappeared under his jeans. She smiled when he inhaled sharply and grinned when he sucked in his stomach, her fingers slipping inside the waist. Nice, she murmured, eyes riveted on the jean button. With a bit of a struggle, she popped it open, her eyes now studying the bulge of his penis underneath. Excitement building at the prospect of seeing her first penis, Aiden's erection a real one. She reached for the zipper and tugged. It stuck slightly, then released, rasping loudly as she lowered it. White underwear appeared in the gap. Now Weather was holding her breath. Her complete attention was on his underwear as she pulled and tugged the jeans waist, moving one side down, then the other, slowly stripping them off him. Her breath expelled suddenly when jeans fell. He wore boxers, and wow! She clenched her pussy. The front tented out. Vaguely she heard him mutter or say something. She ignored him. That tent looked huge. That was Aiden's cock. Now she just had to see. Reaching for the waistband, unaware of anything but the tent, she tugged hard, stripping his boxers down. Wow, she whispered softly. She clenched her legs again automatically. That, inside her, how? This close, an erection looked much, much bigger than she'd imagined. It thrust out from his dense pubic bush, the mushroom tip flushed red. Aiden was circumcised. His shaft was thick, veins noticeable. His cock seemed so big. When it bobbed, it broke her concentration. She glanced up at his face. Like, wow, she said with a grin. She giggled from nervousness when he started hopping around, yanking his jeans off, his cock waving around. It looked so funny. Almost tripping over as I stripped, I smiled at Weather's giggle and said sternly, Stop giggling. You should be awed by my magnificence. I'd sort of frozen, absorbed by the intensity of her inspection, her eyes so large. But it was her wow that had me grinning. Her giggles had me chuckling. Suddenly the sexual intensity vanished. Playfulness emerged, and I liked that too. Actually, I think I liked it more. Weather was so much more relaxed, her face animated, eyes twinkling at me with amusement. Yes, I liked it more. I loved her giggles when I reached behind her back to unhook her bra. She grinned at me, waiting. I searched. "What you waiting for?" she asked with a grin. I couldn't find the clasp. This was damaging my pride. Me, not being able to open a bra. "Try the front, goof," she instructed with a giggle. I did. I stared quite rudely at her petite breasts. A vision of Marty Feldman's eyes flashed through my mind when I observed how her areolae seemed to diverge, the nipples pointing slightly outward. Her breasts were stunningly attractive. Small, delicate, soft nipples, petite breasts communicating adolescence, intensely arousing. Like a cupcake, her breasts were double-mounded, sexy, firm boobs topped with mounded, puffy areolae, her nipples like cherries on top. I was to learn her areolae only puffed out when she was aroused. I realised she was watching me intently as I blatantly ogled her. I grinned. "Beautiful, stunning, gorgeous," I said. "Very nice twins. Hello, I'm Aiden." To the sound of furious giggles, the sight of a blush starting on her upper chest, and sweet breasts jiggling like very firm jello, I bent. Giggles were replaced by a sharp inhalation when I kissed the first perfect boob, giving it a gentle kiss so warm and arousing against my lips. Her hands combed through my hair when I introduced myself to the twin, so sexy. Weather's eyes were burning when I straightened up, locked on me, her adoration making me shiver. There was no smile, just raw heat. I reached for her panties without breaking eye contact. My excitement surged when I touched them. Her eyes softened slightly as white cotton slipped over slender young hips, over the swell of a young bottom and fell to her feet. I was conscious of her legs moving as she moved her feet, my eyes still locked on hers, my erection pulsing. Finally, after an agonizing tease, I glanced down.
Oh, God!
Weather had a wispy sprinkling of pubic hairs, darker than her head, short, glossy, and silky. Pubescent pubic hairs that accentuated her beauty beneath. Her pubis was stunning, full, plump, and sexy as hell. A long clitoral hood was nestled between rounded labia. The gap at the top of slender thighs seemed filled with her sex, achingly arousing and desirable. Soft, silky hairs dusting her vulva, emphasizing her shape. A teenage goddess on the cusp of full womanhood. A bud in the process of flowering. My body reacted to this vision of loveliness, this adolescent beauty that was at once young, yet mature. I reacted to Weather stronger than almost any woman I'd been with. I had to have her. I just had to have her. Lifting her under her arms, I brought her sexy body up to me effortlessly, so light. Weather seemed to melt into me, her head finding my shoulder, arms finding my neck, her legs rising to wrap around my waist. "Aidan," she sighed. I held two spectacular buttocks in my hands, fingertips exploring. Weather shuddered and sucked in a breath when I gently caressed her open cleft. She was silky, moist, and slippery with arousal. My heart thumped harder. Moving to the bed, she clung to me as I bent, her arms tightening around my neck, legs gripping. She clung to me, holding on for dear life as I moved to the center of the bed. She held on tight as we lay side by side, her legs still hooked around my torso, refusing to let go. I moved slightly and moaned as the tip of my erection found her small cleft. She was moist, I was slippery, holding her tightly as she buried her face in my neck, holding on to me tight. I humped gently to slide the tip of my erection along her cleft. Weather moaned and trembled. I reached down behind, slipping my hand over a seductive buttock, reaching deep. Fingertips found hot, silky arousal and two seductive labia. They parted and hugged my fingertip, moist and slippery. I hunched again, sliding the tip of my aching cock through her short cleft, spreading pre-cum, her pussy feeling hot against me. Arousal burned like a fever. She felt so young, so exciting, so sexy. Weather moaned into my neck and tightened her arms when my fingertips discovered her small clitoris. She trembled, so sexy, so sexy. She smelled delicious, a mixture of seductive young girl, the faint aroma of floral soap and the intoxicating scent of young arousal. She felt wonderful in my arms, petite, slender, soft, a sexy little kitten. And when I caressed her clit, Weather purred, her hips gently responding to my touch. She murmured and moaned, her hips gently moving, encouraging. Weather sighed, her face still buried against my neck, arms holding tight, her legs firmly wrapped around me. Her hips moved. I had reached the point where my arousal was becoming agonizing. My cock was a rigid bar, achingly hard and throbbing. Desire pummeled me. Her sexy slippery cleft caressed my crown, soft labia hugging it. My fingertips slipped down, sliding through her cleft. And I shuddered when I found the tiny entrance nestled deep, hot and slippery, promising untold pleasure. I probed gently, amazed at how small the opening was. I hunched, rubbing the head of my erection along her sexy cleft, rubbing her clit, almost fucking her cleft. Holding a naked 14-year-old in my arms, touching her, rubbing her with my straining erection, feeling how sexy and alluring her young body was, and feeling her cling to me, her body trembling as she undulated in my arms, her breath hot against my neck, little sighs and purrs attacking me, and the scent of her arousal assaulting me had me as taut as a bow, on edge, wanting to shove, to penetrate, to fuck. But Weather suddenly jerked in my arms and snorted. Her arms gripped me, her sweet bottom hunching towards me. My crown slipped into the indent of her entrance. Weather snorted again, inhaling through her nose, her body jerking. Oh God, Weather was climaxing. Weather was coming in my arms before I'd even penetrated her. Trying to stop my response would have been futile. I was already lodged at her too small vaginal entrance. I simply held her sweet arse and let my orgasm storm in. Weather held onto me for dear life as she climaxed, snorting quietly with each wave of pleasure hitting her, her hips humping at me. I held her small butt, and as the first wave of my orgasm hit, semen burning up my shaft, I thrust. Weather cried out as my tip penetrated her. My erection swelled and I exploded, pleasure crashing in, semen spurting. She cried out her climax again, arms holding tight. She humped at me, and my erection slipped deeper into a velvet sheath. I swelled and exploded, semen blasting out into her tight pussy, a long, agonizingly painful spurt. She snorted into my neck. So sexy, so sexy. I moaned and, unable to stop myself, I thrust again, harder, my erection burrowing deep, slipping in further as it swelled and exploded, sweet bliss swamping me. Withdrawing slightly, I thrust and came again, hard, hot wetness flooding my crown. Weather snorted and shoved her pussy at me, and suddenly I was buried to the hilt in her, gripped tightly, the tip of my cock pressing against her womb. I swelled, my body ached, and cum exploded into her in an almost painful pulse. All of a sudden we were rutting, stroking, pleasure crashing through me. I held her sweet bottom, pulling her to me, burying my erection deep, spurting hard. I thrust and jerked in an intense climax, Weather's sexy little orgasmic snorts driving me higher and higher, my stomach cramping as I came and came again. Chasing my climax, chasing it, holding her to me tightly until I froze in a rigor-like state, the last pulses of semen oozing out into her. I gasped and collapsed, done, drained, heart racing. The strongest climax I'd ever experienced. Holding Weather tenderly, our pulse rate slowed, breath calmed. Tremors shook her small body every so often. I loved holding her. Her breath was very warm against my neck. She felt perfect in my arms. Slowly, her legs relaxed and slipped from around my waist. I lifted my side to let her pull her leg out from under me. The move made my flaccid cock slip from her pussy. Now, body to body, I held her. Eventually she sighed, nuzzled my neck, and kissed it. It was an intensely loving gesture. "I love you," I whispered. She answered me with a wiggle of her bottom in my hand, another kiss of my neck, and nuzzled into me. She may have spoken, but her voice was muffled. Sun brightened the room. Sounds of a town waking gradually filtered into my consciousness. Wakefulness arrived. I lay next to Weather, my hand gently resting on her bare back, enjoying feeling her slender back rising and falling in sleep. She was beautiful, perfect. I was in love. I loved her deeply, an ache in my soul. Yet now, in the stark morning light, I realized my worst fear had come true. I'd succumbed. She was so like... I let memories drift back, memories I had cherished and agonized over, memories that had shaped my life. They came back in a rush, as if it was only yesterday, crystal clear. Mourners drifted away, smiling gently in sympathy, shaking our hands and giving soft words of condolences. Alexis stood at my side, ramrod straight, as if holding her body rigid would control her emotions and lessen the pain. Sorrow poured through me, heavy and unwelcome. Staring down at the side-by-side graves, 2 coffins resting at the bottom, my sinuses blocked up. Tears prickled behind my eyes. A lump choked my throat. I'd never thought I'd be burying Mom and Dad together. It wasn't something one ever thought about. But here I was. Silence slowly filled the graveyard. Birds twittered. Cherry trees provided shade, sunlight dappling the lush, green, well-manicured lawn. In the distance, over the sloping lawn and field of headstones, I could see tall buildings of Los Angeles and a haze of smog hovering over the city like a dirty cloud. Alexis's hand slipped into mine, her fingers intertwining with mine. I squeezed it. We left, starting a long, silent and emotional walk back to the rented Ford. I was 24, Alexis 20. We were alone in the world. The house felt empty, dead, lifeless. Without the sparkle of Mom's personality or the bigger-than-life bluster of Dad's presence, the house seemed frail, dark and lonely. Alexis moved mindlessly, searching through cupboards and the fridge for the makings of a dinner. Despite our lack of appetite, almost as if it was a duty of the living to cook and feed. I drank. 3 scotches. Dad's 15-year-old scotch. Memories haunted me. The future had evaporated in a flash of loss, my parents passing, robbing me of security and comfort, stealing my dreams, my happiness. I missed a mother's care, her soft smile, her gentle chiding for me to do better, her warm hug. I missed a father who lived life large, filling a room to bursting with his energy, making you feel excitement at the most mundane things, wanting to please him. Aiden? Glancing at Alexis, slender, fine-boned like Mom, young, her soft brown eyes glistening with unshed tears, my heart ached for her. How hard it must be, so much younger than me. I moved to her, wrapping her in my arms, hugging her as she finally let go and cried into my shirt, dampening it with her agony. I held her head gently to my shoulder, another arm around her back. I whispered, "It'll be okay, Alex. It'll be okay." Even though I wasn't sure it would. I could see no light ahead, just a long, endlessly long, dark tunnel. I let her release the pent-up emotions she'd held under such tight rein. I held my sister, hurting for her. When she turned her face up to me, I wiped the tears from her reddened eyes with a thumb. I looked into her soft brown eyes, smiling. She smiled back, reached up, her slender hand slipping to my neck, pulling me. It seemed the most natural thing in the world. To bend and kiss my sister's lips seemed right. And as if we'd both been starved of affection, or needed to reaffirm life, the kiss suddenly became passionate, insistent, demanding. Alexis's mouth opened, her tongue meeting mine. She clutched at me and moaned, or perhaps it was my moan. Alexis moved her body slightly and we were pressed against each other, her slender body moulding to mine, her stomach pressing to a growing lump in my black slacks. Her tongue thrust into my mouth, urgent and seeking, her hands slipping through my hair, curling and holding me as she pushed her pelvis into me. My hands fell, slipping down her back to gently hold her petite, firm rear, pulling her against my erection. She moaned into my mouth. Bending, I swept her up. No thoughts, no plans, just living the moment, drowning in feeling, losing myself in Alexis' kiss, hiding from pain. Carrying her, I found my old bedroom. We tumbled onto the bed. The kiss broke. Hands suddenly started grasping, opening buttons, eyes feverish, small kisses on cheeks and swollen lips and soft necks, fingers fumbling, murmurs and moans. Clothes were discarded onto the floor, feverish need in the driver's seat. And suddenly I was naked. Suddenly Alexis was naked in all her glory. Small firm breasts with dark, dusky areolae and turgid nipples, a flat stomach, slender hips, a full, silky dark pubic bush, and gorgeous slender legs. Suddenly Alexis was buried to me a goddess, youthful, sexy and seductive, with alluring slender curves in all the right places. Suddenly I felt intense desire. She was the prettiest, most attractive woman I'd ever seen. When she smiled and reached for me, I melted into her embrace, felt her small breasts against my chest. No words had been spoken, but volumes had been said. And in that empty house, two people found comfort and love. Alexis cried out when her hymen yielded. I moaned as she took me deep, sheathing me in warm, moist velvet, her body trembling under me, her legs curling around my thighs. I felt love aching inside me as we moved together, hesitantly, clutching at each other as we slowly discovered rhythm, found closeness, entered heaven. We kissed, hot and insistent, tongues thrashing. I caressed youthful breasts, tweaked large nipples, held a beautiful bottom. We thrust and moaned at each other in a growing urgency to mate, be as close as two human beings could possibly be. And as I thrust into her deeply, pressing against her very end, as Alexis writhed, clutching and hugging me tight, I felt ecstasy approach. Alexis heaved off the bed. She let out the only word spoken, a gasp. Aiden, and sang out her climax with sweet moans and grunts, her slender hips thrusting up at me. She twitched and jerked under me, clutching, pussy clenching. My climax hit. Alex, I groaned, my erection swelling. Hunching hard, I buried my erection in my sister's tight warmth. It swelled and ecstasy hit, semen burning up to explode into her, deep, deep. Pleasure crashed in as I hunched again, spurting into my sister even harder. We writhed together, came together. I spurted hard and desperately, hot semen flooding her. I hunched and thrust into Alexis until I was empty, drained, too exhausted to remember. Alexis twitched occasionally as remnants of her orgasm faded. We hugged each other tight, rolled and, with my softening penis slipping from her velvety grasp, sleep came down. I fell asleep with Alexis in my arms, the black sadness inside temporarily held at bay. Sometime during the night, Alexis slipped out of bed. When I woke with first light, I felt her absence. In an instant, I knew she'd gone, not just from my bed, but from the house. I could sense it. 3 months later, she called. "I'm pregnant, Aiden." Despite my pleas for her to get an abortion, she refused. She also refused to see me, ashamed of me, of what we'd done even though I wasn't. She made me promise to move away, to stay away, and never contact her. I loved her far too much to fight. Alexis went to college and became a marine biologist. I moved to Greece, Mom's home, Santorini. Looking at weather in bed next to me, I agonized over it. Should I tell her? Did she deserve to know she was my daughter? Did I even have the right to tell her? And even worse, what would she think if she knew she'd just made love with her father? What would it do to her? With a heartfelt sigh, I rolled over and reached for my Timex watch, glancing at the dial before winding it up. It was my single most treasured possession. I could still see the shy delight in Alexis's 12-year-old eyes as she gave me the birthday present she'd saved for, excitement and adoration in her soft brown eyes. That was the moment I'd fallen in love with my sister. I was 16 and, until weather arrived on Santorini, my sister Alexis was the only woman I'd ever truly loved. Now I had two loves. I felt weather stir. I watched her eyes open. I felt the radiance of the smile that blossomed on her face, followed by a wonderful blush. her morning Aiden, made my heart ache. The adoration in her eyes was a physical blow. Drawing her into my arms, I hugged my little girl to me. "Morning, gorgeous," I whispered into her short, messy hair. I inhaled the smell of love deeply, the scent of weather, cuddly and warm, wafting at me. I wouldn't tell her. I couldn't. I couldn't risk this. This was too special. For 3 days, I lived in paradise, basking in the love and adoration of my daughter, drowning in the pleasure of our love, physical and emotional. I relaxed. I was happy, extremely happy. The morning after our first night together, I'd had a frisky shower with her. As she giggled her pleasure, beautiful eyes twinkling at me, I'd greeted her sexy boobs, not quite as large as a teacup. "Hello again," I'd said, giving them a long overdue kiss, and then, to her soft moans of approval, a gentle suck and soft nibble. Her areolae crinkled and puffed up beautifully, and small nipples became turgid, just like her mother's. I'd kissed my way down my daughter's slender body, tasting nothing but clean, washed, silky skin, water cascading over my head. My hands found her sexy rump, curvaceous, perfect handfuls, just as her gorgeous pussy filled my view. Water cascaded down her body, running in rivulets, following sexy creases, straightening and plastering short pubic hairs to the sexiest pussy in the world. Up close, as I moved in for a taste and a kiss of her proud pudendom, I discovered a small birthmark on her left labium, a little kidney-shaped mark. Trembling, I greeted it, welcoming it with a gentle kiss. I loved how Weather's nervous giggles faded away into soft sighs, her hands finding my head. That first morning, I let the shower almost drown me as I probed my daughter's 14-year-old pussy with my tongue, tracing her long clitoral hood, kissing and caressing. She shuddered, and, had there been more hot water, I might have brought her to a climax, or had her bend over for some arousing pleasure. But a sudden cooling had her screaming and fleeing, shivering as she wrapped a thick, fluffy towel around her, hair plastered to her pretty face, and a grin making my heart palpitate. My Weather was gorgeous, simply gorgeous. That first day, Weather was all hugs and cuddling and soft and sexy and loving. She was spectacular. That first day, I unabashedly fondled as we stayed home. I fondled sexy, unfettered boobs hidden under a large navy blue t-shirt, one that looked suspiciously like one of mine. I drowned in her addictive giggles and died for her murmurs when my hands somehow found the inside of her shorts and caressed a sweet panty-clad butt. I relished her squeals of annoyed pleasure at my loving pinches. I pursued Weather all morning, never getting enough of her sweetness. And that afternoon we sort of found the bed. Somehow clothes were shed, and with an afternoon breeze wafting through open bedroom windows, Weather cuddled and kissed. She smiled with pleasure and shyly reached for my erection, her hand not quite surrounding it. She squeezed, testing its stiffness. It was very, very stiff. She stroked hesitantly until I showed her how. And I groaned deeply when she discovered how silky and slippery Precum was. I had fun too. I discovered fine baby hair in some rather exciting places. I caressed perfect adolescent boobs, petite, firm, and sexy. I liked how they remained youthfully upright even when she was on her back, and how her areolae darkened as they flushed and swelled up, Weather trembling at my oral attention. I adored how her sexy eyes watched me so carefully. I loved her silky young skin. In the brightness of afternoon light, I discovered the marvel of baby hair, fine soft blonde hair that became noticeable when I was a few inches away. Weather had it on her lower stomach. She was ticklish there too, writhing and laughing as I kissed lightly. I found myself very excited to follow that baby hair to the beginning of a remarkably lush mound. I admired short, dark chestnut pubic hairs, so silken and soft. I tried to kiss her cute bush, sighing with pleasure at the thickness of her perfectly shaped mons. When I caressed a silky inner thigh, adding pressure to encourage them to part, and my lips locked on her mons right where a sexy cleft started. Weather tugged at my hair, trying to prevent me from exploring. She closed her legs and muttered something. Rising, I smiled reassuringly. I liked the arousal in her eyes, heat and intensity. Leaning over her, I kissed her navel, her right nipple, smiled and kissed her left nipple, the heat in her expression growing. Smiling, I cupped her gloriously plump pussy, warm and soft pubic hairs tickling my palm, my middle finger slipping along her short cleft. Bending, I kissed weather on her lips, soft and supple lips. I caressed her incredible pussy and whispered in her ear, "Turn over." I was incredibly aroused. Weather was quite spectacular, a nymph, just gorgeous. When she rolled, her exquisite ass filled my vision, a perfect bottom swelling up from her slender back, parting into two seductive, firm young buttocks that together formed a pair. My erection ached and drooled at the sight. I found even more soft baby hair on her lower back, just above her bum, just above the valley formed by two perfect petite buttocks. She murmured when I kissed that baby hair. I was fascinated by how her rump swept up from her slender back so seductively. I smiled at the indents that appeared in each gorgeous cheek when she clenched, two buttocks gripping my probing fingers. Her butt was cooler than the rest of her. She didn't seem to care as I whispered that fact into her ear while caressing the cool skin. She clenched her buttocks again when I kissed one, then the other, pressing my lips deep into cool, firm muscles. I caught the aroma of Weather's arousal, and my excitement surged, erection straining up, pre-cum leaking. Weather moaned into the pillow when I parted her legs and slipped my hand down over sweet buttocks to find and cup her warmth and moisture. She moaned again and clenched her beautiful buttocks when my finger found her small clitoris and caressed. I had her pressing her pussy to the bed as I slipped a finger in to probe her opening, kissing her back gently. She looked spectacularly attractive when I slipped over her back and between her legs, my erection jutting out over her lovely butt. She helped when I slipped a pillow under her hips, lifting for me, her pussy rounding and filling her crotch, appearing so large on her slender young body. Light glistened off her moist arousal, her labia flushed, slightly parted, glistening deeper red shadowed inside. The fever of arousal gently settled in my head. Bending in worship of her perfect adolescent body, I kissed her left buttock, then the right, my hand stroking her short, moist cleft. I caressed two perfect cheeks, watching them part, her small anus winking at me. And below, God below, her labia separated to reveal her aroused clitoris and the intensely exciting tiny entrance to her vagina, dark, so erotically small. Weather's body jerked hard when I kissed her moist pussy and probed with my tongue, tasting her clean, slightly musky flavour. She twitched when my tongue touched her clit. She moaned when I kissed it. I was in a sexual fever with need thrumming my body. My erection felt tight and swollen. Rising, holding my shaft, I nudged the tip against her short cleft, leaning forward slightly to add pressure. I loved the upsweep of her bottom, so young, sexy, and exciting. Her labia oozed apart, slowly spreading to hug the tip, then the head of my cock. I felt her little opening. Weather's petite rear end looked stunningly sexy with my large erection pressed to her. Her youth was absurdly arousing, but when she wiggled her butt, her arms slipping up under her head on the pillow, and when she murmured her arousal and encouragement, my erection strained and ached. I reacted by pressing home, a tiny opening slowly dilating, slowly yielding. I pressed harder as she wiggled, working my large tip in, and suddenly heaven held the top of my erection in a warm, tight velvet grasp. Weather moaned and clenched her buttocks, tightening her pussy on me, so damn sexy. My vision dimmed for just a moment and I had to calm myself. I was so aroused, it was like nothing I'd ever experienced. "You feel so good, Aiden," she whispered. "Better than good, Weather. Unbelievably good," I whispered back. It was utter heaven. With a final longing look at her beautifully shaped ass, I lay over her, sweet buttocks pressing to me. I nuzzled her ear and kissed her neck and drew my daughter's seductive scent deep into my lungs. Weather murmured and curled her arse up. I sank into her, slowly, oozing into her, her tight pussy caressing my crown, then my shaft as I penetrated her deeper and deeper. When her buttocks were pressed hard into my groin, I paused and flexed my erection. Man, she was tight. Weather giggled. Again. Do that again. She reinforced her instruction with a clench of sweet buttocks. I didn't giggle. It was more of a groan of perfect agony. I flexed my erection, God so tight, and then withdrew slowly, feeling her snug pussy clinging to me, holding tight, reluctant to let me go. Reversing before completely out, I pressed in with an erotic thrust. Weather clenched. Oh, good. Do it again, she encouraged. Sliding my hands under her chest, Weather lifted for me and I cupped her breasts, squeezing gently. With Weather's slender body under me, I started stroking into her slowly, long strokes, in, out, slow, arousing strokes, in, out. I thrust into her gently, loving how tight and velvety smooth she felt, how thick I felt. I kissed her neck and sucked her earlobe, holding her firm breasts, thumbs rubbing her nipples, thrusting into her gently. I wanted this incredible feeling to go on forever, to never stop. Making love to Weather was utter bliss. But Weather sighed and undulated, her arse curling up to meet my gentle thrusts, pulling away, curling back up, surrounding my aching erection in hot, tight velvet, a moist grip. She assaulted me with murmurs, sighs and moans of pleasure, singing an erotic song of love, moving ever faster, driving my need higher. My thrust grew faster, harder. Weather's moans turned into cute grunts. My thrusts became urgent. She shoved her sweet bottom back at me harder, faster. We fucked. Long strokes, my groin now bouncing off her sexy butt. And then ecstasy hit. My young lover snorted and jerked, shoving her bottom hard at me. She snorted again, her small body jerking as if electrocuted. Her buttocks clenched, her pussy cramped. She snorted again and I came, erection swelling, semen charging up, shoving deep, freezing, a blinding burst of bliss hammering me. "Oh God, Weather!" I gasped, cum exploding deep inside her. It was agonizing. I hunched, thrust and exploded again, semen blasting out in an endless spurt, my body cramping, sweet agony, pleasure thundering. Holding her petite breasts, laying on her, to the sounds of her incredibly sexy snorts of ecstasy, I came hard, thrusting desperately, spurting deep, coming in her, God-coming baby. It was much later when I rolled off her. Unbelievably, she was asleep. I left the pillow under her hips so I could admire the seductive mound of her bum, the beauty of her buttocks, and wallow in the joy of knowing I'd just had sex with that angel. Had I been capable, I'd have developed another erection at the sight of my thick, milky semen leaking from her reddened pussy, slowly flowing along her cleft to pool on the pillow under her pelvis. I didn't wake her until late afternoon. I simply stared at her for a while before pulling a soft sheet over her. Weather and I made love, slowly, gently and frequently over the next couple of days. It was intensely satisfying. I was quite sure I'd never tire from her sweet, sexy climaxes. At the height of her ecstasy, Weather would always emit the most adorable snorts and grunts as her body writhed and jerked. They seemed to drive me wild, inducing my orgasm every time. Making love to Weather lasted as long as she did, no longer. In those first days, I never managed to survive her orgasm. Despite our intimacy, while I'd have thought Weather would let me touch and fondle during the day, she didn't. She teased me spectacularly by giggling, blushing, and dancing away from my hands. I could see how she loved my attention, and I died every time she decided it was time for a bit of love, how she'd let me grope and fondle with a sweet blush, become all kittenish, snuggle and seek a kiss. I was completely addicted to her. But 3 days after we first made love, Weather stunned me. It was over breakfast on the balcony, crusty rolls, toast, jam, feta cheese and honey, orange juice and freshly brewed coffee, that Weather demonstrated her remarkable maturity, intellect and insight, and also shocked the hell out of me. Twice, It was a very difficult and trying day for me. She'd set the table when I'd gone out to the local bakery to buy fresh crusty rolls and helped put food out. Weather was developing an interest in food, becoming quite an accomplished chef, in fact. And like me, I think she found long leisurely meals very pleasing, especially when taken on the balcony. I loved her company and attention. It had nothing to do with the fact that I was having sex with her, but everything to do with the overwhelming charm of her personality. I was totally and completely in love. I also smiled every time I watched her pink-painted toes wiggling as she ate. I didn't think I'd ever tire of it. The blue and white striped awning was open, providing shade and refuge from an intense morning sun. A gentle sea breeze provided comfortable coolness. Weather, wearing another of my t-shirts and, from what I could see, nothing else, sipped her orange juice and put the glass down. Bending, I tried to casually peek under the table, fascinated and titillated by the possibility that she wasn't wearing panties, or even if she was, wanting a peek. Her hand pressed the t-shirt into her crotch. A giggle made me straighten and look at her. She tilted her head slightly and stared at me with those enchanting eyes. There was no discernible expression on her pretty face as she studied me intently, but I knew that look, that thoughtful look. I began to squirm under her inspection, wondering what was going through her mind. Then she let me know. She dropped the bomb. "You're my dad, aren't you?" Kaboom. It sucked all the oxygen from around me. It deadened sound, muffling the town around us. It made my heart thud painfully and blood drain from my face. Paradise shattered into a million little pieces. A full minute passed before the effect faded enough for me to breathe. "Why would you think that, Weather?" I eventually asked, hoping the quiver in my voice was unnoticeable. She smiled. She smiled. "I think I've known since I first saw you," she said. "I was, immediately attracted to you, you know? And for some reason I felt like I knew you, that we'd met somewhere." Weather paused and smiled at me again. "We haven't, have we?" I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. This was what I feared. How to face the fact that I'd essentially abandoned her, my own daughter. From her perspective, there could be no excuse, none that would be acceptable. "But you are my dad, aren't you?" she asked with a slight tilt of her head. A shiver of fear hit. When Alexis found out I'd told Weather, when she found out about Weather as my lover, my daughter as my lover, she'd find the nearest kitchen knife, or go out and buy the biggest gun she could hold, place the muzzle against my forehead and pull the trigger without a second thought. I shuddered. What had I been thinking? What the fuck was I going to do? In one casual comment, I was going to lose everything. I found my voice. "Yes, I am," I answered. Weather deserved the truth. "How?" "It was the eyes," she interrupted calmly. "Mum has brown eyes. I have yours. I remembered. I saw my eyes in pictures of Grandpa. You've got his eyes. Mum has Grandma's eyes. I've got your eyes. You're my dad and it explains everything. Why Mum never told me who my father was, why she's never married and almost never had a boyfriend, and why she rarely talked about you. Aren't you, angry? Or shocked? Don't you hate me now?" I asked, somewhat perplexed by her calm acceptance of the harsh truth. She graced me with a radiant smile. "Why? I love you. You love me, right?" I nodded. "But we've, had sex." Weather grinned. "I know. Good too. Besides, you had sex with Mom. That's incest. We've had sex. That's incest too. Same thing, right? And I like sex with you." She proceeded to tell me how much better sex was than she'd imagined it would be, how much stronger her climaxes were, and asked, "How many different ways can we make love? Will you show me? Wanna?" With a bite of toast and honey, she continued, "I think Mom misses you, Aiden. She'd get this look when I'd ask about you." Weather chatted away, asking about when we'd been lovers. Why weren't we still lovers? Did I love her? How come I left? She probed and essentially mined me for all the information I had, which wasn't much. But at one point she stopped and stared at me, her head tilted at that angle again. You love Mum, don't you? Of course I do, I replied. No, I mean you love her, like a girlfriend. When I nodded, she grinned, a big grin. Great, that's really great. I was about to ask her why it was great, but, as if I hadn't had enough of a shock that morning, weather calmly electrocuted me. She licked a honey-covered finger. That reminds me, I need pads, Aiden. Remind me to get some when we go shopping. The mug of coffee paused halfway to my mouth, my hand trembling. Coffee sloshed. Had I just heard right? Pads? As in feminine pads? As in periods? Fertile? Oh shit. Since when? Weather? Do you mind me asking when... how come now? She shrugged. I don't know, why? Jesus Christ. She could have gotten pregnant. Do you have any idea how lucky we've been? I asked. She tilted her head and looked at me strangely as if I was acting weird. What are you talking about? Whether you could have gotten pregnant, I could have gotten you pregnant. Jesus, you're 14! Weather burst into laughter, eyes glittering with amusement. You really are a goof, Aiden. Maybe so, but I was not impressed. My frown might have communicated that to her. She stopped laughing and proceeded to chuckle instead. I've been on the pill for 2 years to try to regulate my periods, Twit. She grinned and went back to chuckling at me, her eyes turning to contemplate her empty plate. Reaching out, she grabbed another slice of toast, giggled and shook her head. Geez, Aiden. I pouted and left the table, feeling wrung out and utterly exhausted. And it was only 9 a.m. But as I cleaned the kitchen and Weather happily chuckled on the balcony, I thought of Alexis. Telling Weather about Alexis and I, about our childhood, and our one night together brought it all back. It made me miss my sister. I ached for her. Standing up from the desk, chair scraping across the floor, I stretched my aching back. It had been a grueling 8 hours straight of reviewing code and writing more, and I was only a third the way done. I wasn't worried, though. These days I was taking my time. I didn't really need the income, my other published software programs providing more than enough. Leaving the small study, I walked to the living room, pausing at the entrance. Weather was turned partly away from me towards the balcony, bent over the dining table studying a textbook. Her laptop sat open and ignored on the table, a picture of my white and blue boat lazily rotating horizontally, her latest screensaver. I felt a sharp stab of fear and melancholy. 3.5 months had slipped by in the blink of an eye. It was far, far too fast. 6 months was rushing at me like a runaway freight train. Mid-October felt like it was just around the corner. In less than 3 months, Weather would be gone. I was afraid of her leaving. I stared at her working quietly, already feeling the sorrow of her departure, the melancholy of being alone again. I so loved her I couldn't imagine life without her. But, like a recurring nightmare, it was going to happen. Like it or not, Weather would leave me and I was going to do absolutely nothing to stop her. Estes tipitos. Huh? Weather looked up at me and smiled. I said you're staring. I know that, I'm not. Hold up, you said that in Greek. Yup, she smiled with pride. How? Geez, she said, lifting the cover of her textbook. You don't think this is schoolwork, do you? It's how to speak Greek in 46 easy lessons. They're not so easy, she added with a grin. Wow, I didn't know, but... Why? God, Aidan, you can be so slow sometimes, 'cause I'm staying with you. That's why. I'm not going back, so I need to learn Greek. I paused for just a moment to bask in that wonderful thought. Then I pictured Alexis charging after me with a large knife gripped in her raised hand. No. I shook my head. No, Weather, you're not staying here with me. That's just not possible. I saw a grin fade. Storm clouds gathered in her eyes, turning them a hard, flinty grey, and anger flashed like lightning. Oh shit! I recognised that look. Stormy weather. I held up a hand before the thunder could crash. Your mother would never allow it, I said, but I'd give the world to have you stay, honey. It was with a sigh of relief that I watched Weather's eyes clear and a smile emerge. I'd experienced a stormy weather once and that was quite enough, thank you very much. Would you? You'd really want me to stay? Yup, I nodded. Kay. She grinned, a flit of something passing through her enchanting eyes, and then she turned back to the textbook. Sagapo Baba, she said softly. My heart tripped. I felt tears prickle my eyes. She'd said she loved me a few times, but never in Greek, never so softly with such feeling. And that was the first time she'd called me Dad, and it almost killed me. I found myself a Mythos beer and retired to the balcony, my mind busy, eyes damp, heart aching. Weather stared at the textbook without seeing it. It had shocked her to think she wouldn't live with Aiden. It had angered her that he'd accepted she'd go back to the States. She loved him. There was no way he'd be able to get her off Santorini. She just wouldn't go. It was a huge relief when he said he'd give the world to have her stay. She'd seen the truth in his eyes. He loved her just as much as she loved him. That was good. She sat, mind obsessing on what to do. Eventually it dawned on her. She knew. Now, how? Weather interfered with my cooking as we prepared dinner. She'd been a mischievous sprite all afternoon, practicing her Greek on me, not the language, but behaviour, groping and pinching, laughing with twinkling eyes and dancing away from me when I tried some reciprocal actions. I had a partial erection from her gropes, and when I rearranged it, Weather just giggled and asked, "What's the matter?" with pure impish glee. I was very glad she didn't call me Dad again. It seemed to affect me very, very strongly. With Weather happily having a ball at my expense, she set the balcony table. Dinner was delicious, grilled lamb chops marinated in garlic and crushed fresh mint leaves, a side of rice and a tomato, cucumber, feta, and onion salad. Her company was wonderful. I quite lost myself in her gorgeous, expressive steel grey eyes and her smile, her laughs, her love, and her undivided attention. It was a pure pleasure to talk with her. She was articulate and well-informed and had a wonderful, subtle sense of humour. Almost an hour later, I pushed my empty plate away. Weather sighed and did the same with one last longing look at it. Judging by her active toes, she'd liked the meal. She leaned back and looked at me. I smiled. It was quite fascinating to see her expression change, first contemplative, then sly, followed by pure, unadulterated mischief. It was intensely attractive. And then she grinned. Oh. Do you remember me feeding you ice cream and chocolate sauce? Weather asked. Did I ever? And the way she kissed off the ice cream. Wow. I felt an erection return just at the memory. Yup, I answered with a grin. I will never forget it. Weather grinned at me. So, can we try it again, but just a bit different? Would I think? Would you like to? I thought yes, indeed. I smiled and nodded. Sure, why not, if you insist? Weather laughed. Don't move. I'll be right back. I watched Weather jump up from the table and run inside. I heard her running upstairs. What was she doing? Sipping a glass of Pavlidis Thema, a rich violet-hued red wine, I waited, eventually hearing her descending, followed by a fridge door slamming, the clatter of cutlery, a fridge door slamming. I had a nice partial erection pressing in my jeans as I expectantly waited for Weather to sit on my lap, her lovely butt pressed to me, and letting her feed me ice cream. I especially looked forward to her licking any spilled ice cream from my face. I wondered if I could reciprocate. That would be nice. In fact, it would be very interesting to take some ice cream upstairs and see how her slender, delectable body would react as I spooned it over her and ate it up. Man, her pert boobs would positively... Weather appeared in the balcony doorway. I sucked in a breath. She stood with a bowl in one hand, a spoon in the other, a big, big grin on her face, her hips cocked, and my white dress shirt on, her long, slender, coltish legs bare. What do you think? What I thought was, to hell with the ice cream. I could throw her over my shoulder and, fondling her sumptuous rear, carry her to the bedroom, throw her on the bed and assault her. That's what I thought. Actually, it's a bit hard to think with you like that. I finally got out, nodding at her attire. She laughed. Good. Strolling around the table, she gave me a bump with her hip. Move. I dutifully pulled back from the table and turned slightly, fully expecting her to sit sideways in my lap. She didn't. Here, hold these. I held the proffered bowl and spoon, confused. She leaned in, sexy eyes sparkling with mischief, and kissed me lightly. Don't move, Aiden. Her hands fumbled. Excuse me? What are... Shh, don't move. Don't move. I quickly looked around to make sure no neighbours were watching Weather open my jeans. I was still inspecting the vicinity when her small hand started tugging. Weather. Hush! Lift, she ordered. No one can see with the awning down. Now don't move, and don't drop the ice cream. She seemed quite pleased with the bulge of my erection, judging by her grin, her eyes sparkling. Now don't move, Kay. I nodded, unable to talk. She tugged some more. Jeans and boxers fell to my calves. The chair felt cool on my naked ass. I felt stupid sitting with pants at my ankles, bare-assed, a spoon in one hand and a bowl of ice cream in the other, my erection jutting up from my groin. But I didn't mind in the least when Weather straddled my knees. She grinned at me and shuffled up, her hand gently holding my now rigid erection. Leaning in, she whispered, "I'm not wearing panties." The bowl almost fell. I groaned. Weather smiled at my distress, knelt astride me, lifted up and, guiding my now painful erection, slipped the tip along a very moist slit, back and forth, spreading her moisture and mine. I groaned. "No, don't move," she instructed when my body twitched involuntarily. Jesus fucking Christ. Not moving was agony. "Ready?" she asked, glancing up from our laps. "Weather." "Good. Don't move." I felt her warm cleft spread over my crown, and then the tight opening to her vagina pressing down on me. It oozed open, stretching, heat and moist arousal covering my crown. Weather was breathing hard, moving up and down gently, and then the tip popped in, warm velvet gripping me. My body twitched.
Don't move! Jeez, Aiden! But Weather, you don't... Oh God! Weather started rising and falling on me gently, small up and down motions. Her hand let go of my shaft. She was panting lightly, frowning in concentration, trembling as she worked her incredibly tight, intensely arousing pussy onto me. Slowly she sheathed me, muttering to herself as her pussy pressed to my groin, the tip of my erection firmly pressed to something rubbery deep inside her.
"There," she declared, satisfied, looking at me. "Now give me the ice cream." She smiled at my agony. "Good, huh?" "Fuck me." As if she was back on her own chair, Weather ate a large spoonful of ice cream. Good. Open up." With my erection buried to the hilt in her tight pussy, swelling and throbbing, like a moron I opened my mouth, trying to tamp down a rather desperate urge to sweep all the plates off the table, lay her down and vigorously seek release. Weather proceeded to spoon-feed me ice cream, smiling and instructing, commenting and teasing. "Good. Don't move. This is nice, don't you think? I like ice cream here. Have some more. Open." She grinned at my moans and with a cheeky smile, squeezed my thick cock with her pussy. "You're big tonight. How come?" she inquired with a giggle that caused even more exquisite squeezing. But every time I put my hands on her slender waist, she responded, "Nuh-uh," and made me let her go. I discovered the true meaning of agony and ecstasy. Eventually she announced, "All finished," showing me the empty bowl. I thanked God and reached for her waist. "No, don't move, Aiden. Not yet." Weather twisted to put the bowl on the table behind her. It had an immediate impact on a part of me that was buried inside her. I swelled, growled, grabbed her, and holding her slender boyish hips, pressed her down firmly into my lap. My eyes crossed as I came, semen exploding up and into her. "Wow! I felt that," she declared, her hand dropping to her tummy.
Fuck!
My cock ached and expanded, gripped by her tight, tiny pussy. I wrapped her in my arms, held her petite body tight, and semen exploded into her, hot wetness bathing my crown. She twitched her hips. I exploded, spewing my guts out into her, cum blasting in a long, long spurt and, as pleasure crashed into me, robbing me of breath, I came again. I came hard, spurting desperately. I shook with the intensity of my climax, coming completely, my cock swelling and spurting, depositing everything I had deep, deep into her, utter bliss dimming my sight. Holding her young body pressed to me, I came in an intense orgasm, the most unusual orgasm I'd ever had. As sound gradually returned, laughter and music from the nearby tavern, Weather's soft breaths in my ear, and a distant car passing, I felt my penis gripped in her snug, warm pussy. I was still partially erect, sort of thick, small pulses feeling good. She felt exceptionally wet inside, my semen. She felt tight and petite and young and sexy. A breeze cooled the sweat on my brow. I regained strength. It flowed back into me. Weather lifted her head from my shoulder. She grinned. "So, what do you think? Good, huh?" I kissed her. "Damn. I think spectacular. Amazing. I've never experienced anything like it." "You like dessert?" God, I was so in love with her. I drew her close into another hug, nuzzled her neck and started kissing it, inhaling her sweet scent, my heart swelling with love. She giggled, and then, as I nibbled an earlobe, she murmured. Her bum started moving. Incredibly, I felt myself grow. "Ooh, you did like dessert," she said softly. Rising with both hands holding two sweet buttocks, Weather held onto my neck, her legs rising to wrap around me, pulling herself against me, pressing my cock deep. She sighed into my neck. She then giggled as I struggled to kick jeans and boxers off without dislodging myself or dropping her. It was an awkward walk too. I banged my knee on something and swore. Weather giggled again, the action making her pussy clench on my renewed erection. I had to walk sideways up the stairs, while Weather tried to distract me with little moans or sexy bum wiggles. "You're getting bigger, Aiden. I can feel it. This is very interesting. I like it." I'd never been driven to distraction, but Weather could do it to me every time. Weather discovered two amazing things. No, three. She loved teasing Aiden. He was so sexy and sweet, his eyes burning with adoration and showing every emotion. Just watching his eyes, she knew what he was thinking or feeling. It was very exciting knowing him so well. She also discovered she could actually feel him spurt inside her. That is, if she wasn't coming. And, maybe best of all, feeling his penis grow, lengthen, push deep and become hard inside. Her pussy was amazing. God, it made her so horny. She couldn't help giggle when the klutz knocked into something. Again. What was it about him? She loved hugging his neck and hanging onto him. As he walked, his erection bumped into her very end, sending delicious pulses of pleasure all the way to her boobs. She rubbed them against his chest, sighing with delight. God, she loved him. When he lay back on the bed, she found herself astride him, kneeling, legs spread wide to his sides. She felt tight, her pussy stuffed, hot and very, very wet. She shuddered when Aiden gently caressed her sensitive breasts, her nipples responding, flushing deep red. She shivered when his hand dropped to her pussy, a finger finding her aching clit and caressing. So good. Aiden caressing her. Dad caressing her. A wave of dizziness hit her, her eyes closing. "Daddy," she moaned. His gasp took her by surprise. He yanked her down to his chest, his lips banging into hers. She trembled at his urgent tongue, and, as hands caressed her back, working their way lower and lower as she played with his tongue, chasing it into his mouth. As hands found her bum and caressed and his mouth gently sucked her tongue, she mentally sighed and lifted her arse, drawing his thick erection out slowly. His hands tightened and pushed her butt down hard, slapping her onto his erection. She gasped into his mouth, her pussy stretched, stuffed, so big, his erection so filling. He did it again when she pulled off, tugging her down hard with his hands, a spark of arousing pain hitting her deep inside her pussy. She trembled, her clit scraping on his cock, her sore nipples rasping on his chest. She did it again, and pleasure blossomed in her pussy, radiating out through her. Suddenly she knew she was close, her pussy tight and heavy, pressure inside, boobs aching. Weather started bouncing on Aiden's erection, pressure building. She moved faster, urgent, humping him, humping Aiden, close, closer. A bomb exploded, a snort escaped. "Coming, Daddy," she gasped. "Oh God, me too, baby." Weather felt him thrust up into her, his hands holding her buttocks and body hard. He thrust again, and she exploded, knees clenching, toes curling. She snorted, blood roaring in her ears, and pleasure crashed through her, climaxing hard. Her legs jerked, body jerked, nipples hard and sore. She gasped as another wave of pleasure tore through her, dizzy, pussy cramping. And then she felt it, his erection swelling, expanding, God so big. Her body jerked again as another wave of bliss punished her, and as she felt faint, she heard him cry out her name and felt warmth flood her again. "Daddy, come in." Darkness rushed at her, dizzy, so dizzy, pleasure overwhelming her, falling. Weather didn't know she'd passed out, a rag doll on top of her father, her delicate body still trembling with her ebbing orgasm. She didn't hear her father whisper his love or hold her tight. She didn't feel him slip her onto the bed or cuddle her. She didn't hear him inhale and sigh. I found her on the balcony where she usually was in the morning, her favourite spot. Standing at the open double doors, the cool morning breeze giving me small goosebumps, I studied Weather. She was wearing my button-down dress shirt, the one from last night, white, sleeves haphazardly rolled up to mid-forearm. With her elbows on the whitewashed balcony wall, bent at the waist, slender bare legs straight and ankles crossed. Weather's rear gained magnificent curves, sexy curves, the swell of her bottom stunningly attractive. It seemed so petite, so young, but those curves added allure. I felt their sexiness, an erection forming. My mind pictured me walking up behind her, gently sliding the back of my dress shirt up over her gorgeous bum, nestling my groin to her, leaning over to inhale her sexy morning scent, an addictive, innocent yet sensual aroma. I pictured her softly pressing her rump back at me, smiling softly as her face turned to me, her lovely buttocks clenching slowly to caress my growing erection. She'd sigh at the feeling. I'd slip my hands around her slender waist and let them glide up soft cotton, unbuttoning the dress shirt one button at a time until it would fall open, letting me cup her petite breasts, soft and sexy yet remarkably firm, and feel her raised areolae, maybe tease her nipples. "Are you staring?" She jolted me out of my reverie. I grinned. "Nope." "I think you were," Weather said laughingly, moving her rear in a rather hypnotic way. "You were staring at my butt, weren't you?" She hadn't even turned her head. How the hell did she even know I was there? "Was not," I denied, smiling broadly. I wondered how shocked the neighbours might get if I took her from behind, just like she was, leaning forward on the wall. Damn. "Want breakfast?" "Yup, I'm hungry. I used up too much energy last night. How come you don't have a pool?" "What?" "Look," she pointed. "Lots of people have pools and they look so refreshing. I bet they're a lot warmer than the sea." I moved over to the balustrade next to her where she leaned over, rather precariously, I thought. Placing a hand on her back, I answered, "I do." Do what? I have a pool. She turned her head, steel grey eyes studying me. No, you don't. Grinning, I pointed to the right, one level down, our neighbour. There, that's my pool. No, it isn't. She looked at the pool and back at me, now frowning at my apparent joke. I bent close and kissed her cheek. It is, I said quietly. I own the house next door and rent it out. It used to be one big house joined with this one, the servants' quarters. It was too much for me alone. Her eyes darted to the pool again, then the next door neighbours, their house seemingly stuck to the side of mine. Really? Yup. What do you want for breakfast? I asked, straightening and taking the opportunity to fondle her sexy panty-clad rump under my dress shirt before heading in. Man, she had the sexiest arse ever. She wiggled her butt at me as I left. I was sorely tempted to forget about breakfast. French toast! She called out. It was only 8:30 and already the interior felt cooler than outside. It was going to be a scorcher, the last hurrah of the summer, an Indian summer at the end of September. As the days slipped by, despite my wanting to halt time, I was beginning to panic. I could feel it creeping over me when I'd sit and observe weather silently. My heart would palpitate. I felt restless, constantly shifting, and had a heavy heart. There was a deep sigh in my chest I couldn't get out. Pulling a frying pan out, I started warming it, turned the oven on to keep French toast warm, and began preparing the egg wash. There were times I felt disjointed, as if disconnected from myself. In those dispassionate times, I'd wrestle with how to see weather again. I knew Alexis didn't want to see me. It was only exceptional circumstances that had forced her to ask me for a favor. I couldn't imagine how hard that must have been. Soaking sliced bread, I tossed a knob of butter into the pan, watching it sizzle and melt. Dropping a couple of slices into the pan, I soaked 2 more in the egg wash. The inevitability of my future was rushing towards me. I saw it. Lonely. The house echoing and haunted by her missing personality. Should I move? Would that help? I knew what I really wanted to do. Grab weather and hold on for dear life. But of course I wouldn't. I couldn't. I couldn't hurt Alexis. Weather had promised not to tell her mother about us. Thank God for that. It would kill my sister. The scent of burning drew me back. Fuck. I'd never burnt French toast. Tossing them in the trash under the sink, I started 2 new ones. I think I'll have cereal, Aiden, Weather announced from behind me. I turned. Man, that grin. Actually, that shirt too. She slinked up to me, hugging me. Just kidding. Go get dressed, I suggested. We're going to the beach today. I wondered if the strenuous physical activity of swimming would ease my growing panic at losing her. Kay. Weather stood on tiptoes and kissed my cheek before leaving the kitchen. Her kiss lingered. That night, as Weather cuddled to Aiden's side, she listened to his soft breathing, her hand resting on his chest as it slowly moved up and down. Moonlight lit the bedroom almost as if it was day. A tingle of pleasure and pride warmed her. She felt his semen leaking from her pussy, warm and wet on her thigh. She should get up and clean herself, but it was too comfortable next to Aiden. Besides, she was exhausted. She'd come twice today. Weather rested her cheek on his chest, nestled into the crook of his shoulder, her body tight to his side. His hand felt good resting on her arse. He smelled of sweat and sex and Aiden, all yummy. She let her mind drift back over the day. It had been different, to say the least. She felt herself blush, hot, cheeks burning. Gored. Her friends back home would never believe her, not in a million years. It had been so naughty. Aiden had decided for some reason he was going to take her to Parissa Beach. Have you ever seen black sand? He'd asked with a grin and a twinkle. The beach really was black. Lava rock had been pounded into fine black sand. It seemed so weird. On top of that, with the late September sun so hot, the black sand absorbed heat. It was burning on her feet when walking. Laying on a towel while Aiden swam, She shielded her eyes to admire an enormous rock rising from the sea. Aidan had said it was illuminated at night. Mesa Vuno, it was called. She'd wondered if they'd stay all day so she could see it. Then she'd become distracted. Feeling naughty, Weather had checked around the almost deserted beach, smiled, and rolled onto her side next to Aidan as he flopped down to sunbathed, his eyes closing. Surreptitiously, she'd started stroking his damp thigh, gently, softly. She liked his twitch. Then, with a final check around her, she'd let her hand slip up over his bathing suit and stroked his front, sort of fondling. She'd smiled when Aidan jerked, his head rising to stare at her, then look around. She'd grinned as his cock grew under her palm, thickening and lengthening. It was so sexy and arousing. She just loved turning Aidan on, knowing she could turn him on. It was a powerful feeling. Then he'd groaned. He'd tried to pull her hand away. She'd resisted. As he frowned at her and opened his mouth to chastise her, she'd bent close and, her imagination running away, asked if she could see him come. "I know what it feels like, but I've never seen you come. Would you show me?" His growl had her laughing hard. He'd jumped up, grabbed his towel to hold in front of him, frowned at her, his eyes flashing heat and arousal at her, and reached for her wrist, hauling her up and dragging her to the Fiat. She was screaming in laughter as he muttered, "Show you? Show you? I'll show you." Then, he'd driven like a maniac, swearing at her every time she reached for his crotch and fondled his erection, removing her hand, the car swerving dangerously, other drivers riding their horns. In under half an hour, he was pulling her from the car and into their house, dragging her upstairs. She had tears in her eyes as she laughed at his urgency, and almost peed herself when he threw her on the bed, his hands wrestling with her bikini, his erection tenting his swimming suit. When he had her bare-assed naked, he stripped, his erection jutting out. Weather had watched, horny as hell from his actions and the pure lust in his gorgeous eyes. She'd felt her pussy moist, swollen, throbbing, her clit aching for a touch. And she'd been fascinated at how he calmed and stared with such longing at her body. Then he'd shocked her. "I'll show you if you show me." A thrill charged through her. She blushed bright red, her cheeks hot. She'd never masturbated in front of anyone, but, wow, just the thought had her nipples aching for a caress or squeeze. Masturbating in front of Aidan sounded so naughty. She studied the heat in his eyes, grinned. K. Letting her knees part and fall to the bed, Weather slowly reached down, her hand cupping her pussy. She held one breast in the other, her eyes fixed on Aidan's erection. Using an index finger to find silken moisture, slippery moisture, Weather pulled it up, shuddering as she touched her clit. She started masturbating for Aidan, her finger rubbing slowly. As Aidan crawled onto the bed, Weather spread her legs, watching as he knelt between them, his hand gently stroking his erection, slipping up and down the shaft. A bead of clear liquid appeared in the pee-hole. Aidan gathered it, spreading it, his fist sliding up and down. Weather trembled, aroused, so horny. It was incredibly arousing to masturbate for Aidan. Her index finger started moving faster, strumming her clit, pleasurable feelings spreading through her body. She stared at Aidan, so big, kneeling between her legs, his cock looking inflamed and red. Geez, she'd had that thing inside her. Blood pounded in her ears, her climax approaching. She tweaked her nipple, pinched it. Nice pain, nice pain. Eyes locked on Aidan's cock. Dimly she heard him. Coming, Weather. She'd watched as he gripped his cock harder, aimed it down, a small bead of white oozing out. Weather watched him freeze. She heard him gasp. And suddenly white semen blasted out in a long rope to splash hot and thick on her hand and pussy. She jerked as another big spurt exploded from his erection, spraying onto her pussy. Weather groaned, rubbed his cum over herself, hot and slippery. She saw another rope spurt onto her tummy and pool in her belly button. She snorted, her body heaving as an orgasm exploded, finger strumming her clit, spreading Aidan's thick cum. Her body arched. She shook, tremors of her climax thundering through her, finger strumming, coming, wet, covered in Aiden's cum, watching his cock spit thick semen, feeling it land on her. Weather came hard, dizzy, writhing. Aiden staring at her, those eyes, coming Aiden, coming. Eventually she'd managed to breathe. Eventually they'd taken a frisky shower together, and later, after dinner, they'd made long, slow love. As Weather cuddled to Aiden's side, his cum leaking from her, she whispered, "I love you, Dad," to his sleeping form. She cuddled a bit closer and smiled, sleep edging in. With a shiver, Alexis rubbed the goosebumps on her upper arms, regretting her choice of the silk sleeveless blouse. She loved the turquoise and yellow pattern, and, with the heat she was expecting, it should have been the ideal choice. It went so well with her cream slacks. Nevertheless, she'd forgotten how chilly airplanes were. Alexis was blind to the majestic beauty of the blue Aegean Sea passing below the wings of the Airbus A318. She wasn't watching the intriguing display of Greek islands dotting the sea, infamous islands of Greek legend: Mykonos, Milos, Seriphos, and Sifnos. Her mind was busy with other, more personal issues. Hugging herself, Alexis wondered why she'd caved to Weather. In fact, she was still angry she'd exceeded and absolutely flabbergasted. Weather had resorted to blackmail. "Come to Santorini, Mom, or I won't come home, I'll stay here." Alexis knew Weather too well to underestimate her determination. It was one of the character traits she liked in Weather. So, angry and afraid of losing her daughter, she'd reluctantly agreed. A stab of fear intruded on her dark thoughts. She was going to see Aiden. What would he look like now? 15 years older and no longer a young man. The prospect of having to face him brought butterflies to her stomach. Her mind slipped back further, way back. 11 years old, living in Accra, Ghana, Daddy posted to the new diamond mine. She'd been so scared, the local men with such dark, ebony skin drunk in the middle of the day, and leering at her as she walked home from school, hugging her satchel tightly and trying to ignore their dirty comments about a white girl. She remembered one reaching and grabbing her shirt, and the spurt of acidic fear she'd felt. She remembered Aiden appearing, a 15-year-old hitting a 20-something-year-old man and pulling her away to safety. Aiden had always protected her, been with her brother the most important person in her life after Mom and Dad. But that event and the way he hugged and comforted her had been the beginning. She was 12 years old when she'd fallen in love with Aiden. He was tall and slender and feisty and funny. Living back in the States, Dad at head office finally, Aiden had kept her company until she gradually made friends with other girls. It was his eyes, steel grey, Dad's eyes, and the way he would completely focus on her, wrap her in the warmth of his attention so that everything else in the world, shyness, angst, worries, and fears, would simply fade away. In the comfort of Aiden's attention, Alexis felt at peace. Yes, 12 years old and with puberty raging through her, Alexis fell in love. The Airbus banked. A Greek announcement of imminent arrival at Thera squawked over the intercom. Alexis missed it. She felt fear again. How could she face Aiden? She'd been responsible for him leaving university, for abandoning his PhD, for forcing him to leave everything behind. She'd ruined his life, all because of a selfish moment of weakness. But the pain of loss, of putting Mom and Dad to rest, and Aiden's eyes, so loving and caring, and the love she'd carried for 8 long years, the dreams of kissing Aiden, of feeling Aiden's love, had finally overwhelmed her. Despite all the amorous and lecherous advances she'd had from men and women, she'd never been attracted, never been interested. There was only one man she loved, and, when he'd held her so gently as she cried letting her agony out, when he'd looked so deeply into her eyes with such love and caring, she'd broken down and sinned. She'd kissed Aiden, and even worse, she'd seduced Aiden. She'd been a virgin, 20 years old, and still a virgin. But he was everything she'd dreamed of, kind and gentle, loving. When she'd woken towards dawn, feeling so peaceful in his arms, reality had rushed in. Suddenly, in the cold light of day, she realized she'd committed incest and forced Aidan to sin. Her shame had driven her from his bed and away, far away, back to university. And even worse, she'd gotten pregnant. In her muddled state, she'd rejected Aidan, afraid she'd hurt him more if he was near her. She'd refused an abortion. It was Aidan's child, Aidan's. She couldn't get rid of it. Alexis trembled. She didn't feel the Airbus begin its descent to Santorini, the sudden weightlessness, or grind of flaps extending. She smiled, remembering weather, beautiful weather, Aidan's gift to her. In weather, she was forever close to Aidan, seeing those magnificent eyes. She saw Aidan in weather, the love and inner strength, the sudden storm of anger that would appear, powerful and raging, lightning bolts of fury flashing and then fading as fast as it had arrived. Alexis smiled to herself. Weather had inherited her stubborn streak and her father's temper. She was a force of nature when she wanted to be. There wasn't anyone in the world that could resist her when she set her mind to something, except perhaps Aidan. A screech of tires and thump of landing brought Alexis back, her stomach roiling. She was going to see Aidan. How much did he hate her? Had he forgiven her? Stepping out into the radiant Aegean sun, after pausing to look around Santorini airport, Alexis started down the stairs. The articulated bus waited to carry passengers to the terminal. She still couldn't believe she was here. She couldn't believe she'd agreed to come. She felt like a virgin on her wedding night, excited, yet scared. How much had he changed? How much did anyone change over almost 15 years? As she stepped from the passenger bus and neared the entrance to the arrivals hall, Alexis paused. Peering in, she spotted Weather, her breath caught in her throat. Weather was holding Aidan's hand, and with shocked surprise she noticed a familiar old Timex watch she'd given him on his wrist. Alexis looked at Aidan and felt the same old reaction, an ache. He was the only person she'd ever loved, and now, at almost 39, he'd matured into a stunningly handsome man. Even from a distance she could see the crinkle lines that had formed at the edge of his eyes, a sign of laughter being large in his life. Her heart ached when she saw steel grey. It was as if his eyes were hardwired to her heart. She felt her face flush when he spotted her and smiled. It was devastating. Her knees weakened suddenly. God, it had been so long, so much had passed. He had so much to hate her for, and yet he smiled. Weather felt Aidan's hand shaking in hers. She saw him smile despite the shaking and followed his stare. "Mom." Weather grinned and waved. "Mom." I hadn't believed Weather when she told me we needed to come to the airport. I hadn't believed her when she'd told me Alexis was arriving. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be possible. Alexis hated me, had never forgiven me for what I did to her. She'd never willingly set eyes on me. Yet Weather insisted. I refused, not believing her. And then she'd looked at me. "Please, Dad." So here I was, knees shaking with fear. And my God, Alexis took my breath away. Tall, elegantly slender and fine-boned, wearing a sleeveless turquoise and yellow silk blouse, cream-coloured slacks and open-toed shoes, with her dark chestnut hair cut to just below shoulder length and pulled back in a neat ponytail, Alexis looked exactly like I remembered her at 20 years old. Exactly. "Come on, Aidan," Weather insisted, pulling at my hand. I glanced at her pretty, pretty face and felt another surge of fear. What had Weather done? My leaden feet moved reluctantly. The smile of welcome on my face felt like it was painted on. My heart was racing. Alexis was going to kill me. And then Alexis smiled. It hurt me. It was Weather's smile, big, welcoming, honest. "Hey, Aidan," she said gently, her warm, soft brown eyes watching me without a trace of hate. They almost looked hesitant. Why? Weather stood back slightly, her complete attention on Mom and Dad. She knew Dad loved Mom, he'd admitted it enough times. She knew Dad blamed himself for hurting Mom, but what Dad didn't know was Mom loved Dad. Weather knew. Things she'd never understood had become clear as she lived with Aidan. Why Mum was so unwilling to talk about her brother. Why Mum wouldn't talk about Weather's father. And how, when Mum didn't realise Weather was watching, she'd pick up that one photo on her dresser, stare at it while gently caressing it with her thumb, a wistful smile on her face. Yeah, Weather knew Mom loved Dad, even if he was her brother. And now she watched them. She saw the hesitancy, a smile, and their eyes seeing no one else. She watched, fascinated, as they seemed to edge closer, almost awkwardly. Aidan saying something that made Mum smile, how he gently took her hand in both of his. She watched, waiting for old feelings to emerge, for misunderstandings to be discarded. And finally, Weather sighed and smiled when Mum's arm slipped around Aidan's neck, Aidan's around Mum's still slender waist. Weather wanted to cry with Mum when she saw her tears, Mum's face buried in Aidan's shoulder, her body shaking. They stood there a long, long time holding each other. Weather waited, smiling. Maybe Mum would forget how she had been blackmailed. 2 hours later, they were sitting on the balcony, the first week in October unusually mild. Weather sipped her Coke, Mum and Aidan sipping cold white wine. Weather thought it cute how their eyes kept being drawn to each other, even when talking to her. After inspecting her daughter, Alexis turned to her brother and asked, "How's her stay been, Aidan? She looks happy and healthy." Noticing Weather's grin, I replied, "She is. Healthy, at least. You'll have to ask her if she's happy, but I suspect that grin means she is." Guys, I'm right here, you know," Weather said. "Has she behaved? I hope she hasn't caused too much trouble." "Mom, I'm sitting right here." "Most of the time it's been nice having her here. Well, some of the time," I said with a smile. "Guys, she can be quite a handful, you know. If you're not careful, she'll try to run your life," Alexis said, smiling at Weather's increasing agitation. "Tell me about it," I answered. "She'd been here less than an hour and started insulting me." "I did not." "She had the temerity to insult my car," I continued to Alexis. Weather blushed. "Oops, I did too, didn't I? But it's tiny," she claimed, holding up her hand, index finger 1 inch from her thumb. Alexis and I both started laughing. Damn, but Weather was cute. That night I moved to the couch, giving my room to Alexis. And that night, late, around midnight, Alexis woke me as she walked down the stairs, the creak from the 3rd step quite loud. I watched her make her way over to me in the bright moonlight. She was wearing a short satin nightdress that appeared cream-coloured. Her hair was loose and falling around her face. I rolled onto my side, pressing to the back of the couch, and patted the cushion for her to sit. The couch dipped as she settled. "You're awake too?" I didn't tell her she woke me. I was distracted by her nipples, so clearly outlined under her satin nightshirt, the swell of her breasts so very noticeable. I remembered Alexis's nipples so well. She seemed to have grown ever more beautiful with age, maturity adding an elegant sexiness to her. The strong attraction I'd carried all these years was still there. I wanted to continue from where we'd left off over 15 years ago. And then guilt rushed in. "Listen, Alex," I started. Her finger stopped me. She leaned down, her soft hair falling forward like a curtain. Soft, loving eyes regarded me. Her hand found my forearm and started caressing with familiarity, comfortable. It was an odd conversation that ensued. I was quite astonished that she blamed herself for what happened so long ago. She seemed quite surprised when I corrected her, telling her it was the other way around. As we smiled and chuckled at our ignorance, and the wall of distance and time and misunderstanding crumbled, old feelings came to the fore. In the moonlight, her blush seemed pale when I told her I loved her. She understood exactly what I meant. Alexis rolled onto her side, and as I spooned her and wrapped my arms around her, she admitted she loved me. But despite the revelations, emotional exhaustion overwhelmed us. Alexis fell asleep in my arms, my bedroom left vacant that night. It was the next night when Alexis again tiptoed down the stairs. She took my hand and tugged. "Come." I loved her blush, the one she'd passed on to weather. I loved how she gently squeezed my hand as she led me up the stairs. I absolutely loved how she turned into me as soon as the bedroom door closed quietly, and for the second time in my life I kissed my sister. Spaghetti straps slipped off slender shoulders, her cream satin nightie fell to the floor with a quiet swoosh, and I had Alexis' naked breasts pressed to my chest. Her back was silky soft with a seductive curve that I followed from shoulder blades down to the base of her spine. The upsweep to luscious firm buttocks was thrilling, and holding my sister's arse was so arousing. Fingers toyed with the waist of my boxers as silken warm lips lightly touched mine, Alexis looking at me with her soft, warm brown eyes. It was a gentle kiss but intensely exciting, the first in so long. When she pressed her sexy body to my erection, I moaned, opened my mouth and probed. Boxers fell to my feet, Alexis' hand gently holding my cock. She teased me with her tongue and a squeeze. It was too much. Tumbling onto the bed, I caressed her full, weighty breasts, still a perfect, beautiful handful. I loved how turgid her nipples became, how responsive and sensitive they were. She lost her hold on my erection, her hands combing through my hair. I kissed and sucked her sexy breasts, loving how she moaned and arched up to me. My hand traced a still flat stomach and found her trimmed pubic hair, silky soft. It was my turn to moan. My sister's pussy was a full handful, mounded, sexy. But it was the moisture of her arousal dampening my fingertips that had me in a sexual frenzy. I couldn't wait. I couldn't take time. I needed my sister at that moment, aching for her. No words had been spoken, just soft moans breaking the silence. It felt like 15 years ago. Alexis parted her legs for me, her hands urging me on top. Soft thighs rose to my sides, slender legs caressing me. She smiled at me, one hand reaching to cup my cheek, the other slipping between us, reaching down to guide me. Tremors shook my body at the heat and slippery moistness touching my cock, Alexis so aroused. I was shaking when she slipped the tip of my aching erection up and down through her cleft and moaned when the tip was carefully lodged at her moist entrance. She moved my cock around until satisfied, then let it go, her hand finding my waist, pulling, urging me to penetrate her. "Gently," she whispered. "It's been a long time." Hunching my back, I found my sister's breasts, kissing then sucking. Her hand held the back of my head, pulling my mouth to her breast. Her sigh sounded loud, and, as if she suddenly relaxed, Alexis' pussy yielded, her small opening stretching over the flared crown pressed tightly to her. With an exquisite snugness, I penetrated my sister, pressing into her gently, sliding my erection in deeper, out, in even deeper, silken moisture, sheathing my shaft. As I buried myself in her pussy, completely buried, her mons pressed to me, I gently lay on her, letting my full weight down. Alexis's mouth found mine, her tongue forceful, probing, excited. Her slender legs caressed me as she moved under me. Reaching down, I cupped a sexy-ass cheek and pressed into her until I felt her rubbery cervix. We both moaned. I withdrew and plunged back into her snug pussy, banging my groin against her clit. Alexis tore her mouth from mine and hugged me, her pelvis surging up at me. Without a word having been uttered, we started fucking. This was not making love. This was fucking, rutting, pure sex, our desire for each other too strong. I hunched and fucked my sister with long, deep thrusts, slipping into her snug pussy, withdrawing almost all the way, fucking in hard. Alexis held me tight, curled her pussy up to meet my thrusts. We fucked with my face buried in her neck, holding her sexy rear, fucking hard. Pressure of an incipient climax built, an ache in my groin. I fucked my sister harder, getting close, chasing my orgasm, fucking my sister. I felt her arrive, her body arching up to me. "Aiden!" she gasped in my ear. Alexis jerked under me, her hips stabbing up at me, burying my aching erection deep. I felt my climax rushing towards me. Reaching down, I grabbed her ass with both hands and fucked hard, hard. "Alex!" I gasped and heaven opened. Pleasure exploded, semen burning up my shaft. I came explosively, frozen, my cock buried deep in my sister's pussy. I gasped, withdrew and thrust hard. Glorious release, beautiful release, semen exploding into her womb. The gates of heaven opened, and I fucked Alexis with short, hard thrusts, spurting hot, thick cum into her. Alexis thrust her hips at me, murmuring, encouraging me to come. It hurt. My body ached as I spurted, coming in my sister, desperately coming in her, fucking hard, coming until only twitches remained, breath rasping, perspiration coating my body, tired, drained. Alexis's pussy twitched every so often, gently clenching my waning erection. I lay on her, sweaty, heart racing as she caressed my back. Eventually, my soft penis slipped from her warm, moist pussy. I sighed at the loss and rolled off her. Alex cuddled up to me. "It's been too long, Aiden," she sighed, whispering. "I missed you so much." Holding her tenderly, I agreed. It had been far too long, so much time wasted. It was the third day when Weather excused herself early and went up to her room. She lay on the bed after changing, the windows open, a cool October breeze wafting in. Weather was horny and frustrated and angry. She hadn't considered the problems of having Mom here. She hadn't thought it through. No sex with Aiden was driving her nuts. Not being able to tease him, kiss him, hug him, and fondle him was aggravating. It was just as bad not having Aiden constantly chase her for a grope, a fondle, or a kiss. Damn. Why had she been so stupid? Weather rolled onto her side, pissed at everything and everyone, especially herself. Downstairs, Alexis asked Aiden, "What's wrong with Weather?" Aiden's shrug didn't bring any light to the matter. But there was something going on. Alexis could see it in the way Weather kept staring at Aiden. At first, she'd liked that Weather obviously loved him. That was very clear. But that expression tonight, the clouds of an incipient storm in her eyes, it was almost as if... No, it couldn't be. But... "Aiden, I'll be back. Just going to have a chat with Weather before she falls asleep." "Yeah?" Weather said at the knock on her door. She watched Mom come in, closing the door behind her gently. Mom sat on the bed, her hand combing through Weather's short hair, an intensely caring and loving gesture. Weather saw Mom smile softly. "How long?" "Huh? How long what?" Weather asked. Mom, soft eyes studying her, spoke quietly. "How long have you and Aiden been lovers?" she asked. Weather blushed furiously, her heart rate spiked. "Oh shit. How did you know?" she asked nervously. "I'd have to be blind not to notice how you two behave with each other. Tell me, was it Aiden that initiated?" Weather dropped her eyes, interrupting, speaking quickly. "No, he didn't. I sorta did." Alexis smiled gently. She knew full well what the result was when Weather decided she wanted something. Poor Aiden. "I see." Weather looked back at Alexis. "Sorry, Mum," she said abashedly. Then, with returning enthusiasm, "But have you seen him?" Alexis laughed. "Yes, actually I have." Weather grinned. "I don't know what it is, Mum. It's not like he's the handsomest guy I've ever seen, but geez, he's the sexiest by far." Alexis stroked Weather's short hair. She liked her enthusiasm. Yeah, Aiden was sexy. With a sigh, she gathered her courage and began. "Weather, there's something I have to tell you. Something I should have told you long ago, but it's so hard to explain. You see..." She paused and took a deep breath. Weather interrupted again. "You mean about Aiden being my dad? I know already." That startled Alexis, but the conversation that ensued startled her even more. She'd never in her wildest imagination have believed she'd be talking with Weather about a sexual relationship, especially when their lover was the same person. It was very odd. Nevertheless, Alexis remembered herself at 14. She'd have jumped into Aidan's bed when she was 12 if he'd asked. She'd loved him so much. Weather grinned when told. Alexis could see the relief in her eyes. But then their conversation turned to more practical matters. Exactly how did two people share a lover? Some of Weather's surprising and adventurous ideas made Alexis blush.
Eventually, she left Weather's bedroom after getting a promise that Weather would keep Aidan in the dark about their chat. She'd decided her brother should pay the price for not telling her about him and Weather.
The next night, as they sat eating dinner on the balcony, Weather decided Mum was as bad as Aidan. She grinned. She and Aidan had cooked Mum a special meal of tender lamb shanks. And as they cooked, when Mum wasn't around, Aidan started groping and fondling like a teen, making her horny and ache for him. They ate dinner leisurely, the autumn air fresh and cool enough for sweaters, houses lit up all around them, pools glowing with their pool lights on, and music drifting to them from a nearby tavern along with bursts of laughter. Weather watched Mum and Aidan. She recognised the expression in Mum's face. Something was going to happen. With no change in expression or hint of what she was doing, Mum took a sip of red wine, crossed one knee over the other, and spoke, looking at Aidan. "I understand you've been sleeping with my daughter." Aidan choked and then blanched, fear in his eyes. Mum looked at him without an expression. After their talk, Weather knew Mum wasn't mad, but it was sort of funny seeing Aidan cowed. He was deathly pale. And then Weather ruined it. She couldn't stop the giggle that escaped. He looked like a scolded puppy. Aidan's eyes darted to her and back to Mum. Colour returned to his face and he grinned sheepishly. "Sorry," he offered. Mum was hilarious. "Sorry? Sorry, Aidan? As if it was an accident. How did that work? Did you just happen to fall into her bed? Oops, sorry. Was that what happened? Oh look, I'm naked. Oops, sorry?" Mum's smile softened the delivery, and Aidan's grin made Weather's heart patter. He pointed at Weather. "Ask her. It was all her fault." "Really? How's that?" Alexis asked, resting her chin on her hand, elbow on the table, leaning forward towards Aidan. Weather, still grinning at his discomfort, watched as he glanced at her, then back at Mum. The water and that lacy thing, you know. And then there was... And do you have any idea what your daughter can do with ice cream? How was I to know? I mean..." He had Mum laughing as he explained nothing. He had Weather laughing, her heart aching and then blushing furiously at his recounting an ice cream incident, Mum looking at her with surprise in her eyes. Weather masturbated in bed that night, but when dawn broke, she'd had enough. It wasn't fair. Besides, she was horny. Slipping from bed, she quietly made her way to Aidan's room, carefully crawling up the bed to settle between Aidan and Mum. She reached down and pulled the sheet over her, turned on her side, and snuggled back against Aidan. I woke to the feel of a warm young body pressing back at me. Rolling, I spooned the body. A familiar scent made me open my eyes. I had Weather in my arms, her sexy posterior pressed to my naked groin. She smelled delicious, fresh, sleepy, young and intoxicating. It didn't surprise me in the least when a morning erection formed. I wasn't really thinking as my hand found a slender hip. Weather had remarkable curves when on her side. She also moved too sensually. My erection found the valley formed by her lovely buttocks, her bum clench that let me know she felt me was delicious. I let my hand slide over her hip to find the hem of her nightshirt. Tugging gently, I drew it up, fingers finding soft cotton panties. Unable to stop myself, I caressed her petite panty-covered arse, teasing myself by sliding fingertips under elastic. Weather moved. Cotton panties were pulled down over one hip, her sweet buttock partially exposed. She lifted and shifted and, with a pulse of pleasure, two naked buttocks formed to my now straining erection. When they clenched, precum leaked. No word had been spoken. I was horny, Weather felt so sexy. Reaching around her, slipping my hand under her nightshirt, I found a delectable petite breast. When I caressed it, Weather responded by pressing her ass back against me and squeezing her buttocks. Perfect. Her hand found my erection and steered it down, the tip sliding through her butt crack, across her anus and slipping between slender young thighs. She let go, clasping me with her thighs. I thought I heard her sigh, but I definitely felt her body tremble and I felt her hunch slightly, her pussy pressed to my shaft. Her fingertips found the tip of my cock and pushed. She hunched and, in an exquisitely erotic move, Weather guided the crown of my erection back through her slit to sink into her, spreading her labia as she raised her leg to rest over mine. In an exquisitely erotic move, my erection pressed and slowly sank into her tight, tight vagina, hot and velvety. In a heart-stopping move, Weather pressed her ass back at me and sheathed my entire erection inside her. For 2 or 3 minutes we lay quietly. I wallowed in the sensual delight of holding such a slender, young teenage girl, one who smelled so outrageously good. I wallowed in the erotic thrill of having my erection held tightly, gripped by a small pussy, buried in a 14-year-old. Weather was snug and hot and moist, flexing gently as if massaging my cock. It was too much to bear. Hugging her slender body more tightly, I withdrew, her pussy desperately holding on to me, almost like a vacuum. She trembled in my arms. Before the crown slipped out, I reversed, pressing into her slowly, gently, carefully, her soft walls parting, my shaft enrobed by hot liquid velvet. Suddenly I remembered. Alexis was in bed. Alexis was next to Weather. God, I was having sex with her daughter in front of her. It made my erection swell and strain. It was incredibly arousing. Weather moaned quietly as we hunched and thrust, sliding deep, slowly, slowly, long, gentle strokes that had me trembling. So sexy. And then Alexis woke up. She raised her head from the pillow, soft brown eyes taking in the sight of her brother making love to her daughter from behind. She smiled, accepting, eyes twinkling, and lay her head back on the pillow. Alexis stared into my eyes as I fucked into Weather gently, deep, intensely exciting thrusts, her pussy gripping me, so tight. Weather trembled in my arms. She hugged my arms tight, held my hand to her breast. I almost came when Alexis reached out to caress Weather's cheek. "Mom," she whispered, pressing her ass back at me, pushing me deep. Alexis smiled, bent slightly and kissed Weather on her cheek, moved back and watched us. My heart skipped. And as Weather started undulating, moving with more force, as I felt Weather's familiar breathing change at an incipient climax, I was stunned to see Alexis's eyes cloud, her body shudder, her nostrils flare. I saw where she was touching herself, her arm moving, hand at her crotch. I was floored to see my sister experiencing an orgasm as I fucked her daughter, my daughter. The impact was immediate and furious and agonizing. Weather jerked and snorted, her bum clenched. With both of my loves climaxing, I exploded, thrusting her slowly, my erection aching and expanding as a massive pulse of cum rocketed out. I gasped and thrust into Weather's tight pussy, exploding, semen bursting out in an endless spurt. I hugged my climaxing, jerking, snorting little girl and started thrusting more urgently, exploding with pure bliss, semen flooding her pussy. I thrust and came, staring at my sister, feeling like I was spewing my insides into Weather, coming hard, spurting, coming until finally, my orgasm released me from its grip. Panting, I lay quietly, body perspiring. I held Weather tight, her seductive compact butt pressed to my groin, my softening penis feeling her waning clenches. It was an amazing climax, Alexis watching me have sex with our daughter, and coming at the sight was exceptionally erotic, like nothing I'd experienced before. I knew we'd just entered a new and exciting phase of our relationship. I saw Alexis smile when Weather started snoring softly. Amazingly, with my partial erection firmly held in Weather's snug 14-year-old pussy, I felt sleepy myself, my eyelids drooping. I was sexually exhausted, drained. Smiling to myself, congratulating me on my good fortune, I let myself go. Alexis studied Aidan and Weather as they slept. She loved how Aidan held Weather with so much passion and tenderness. When she'd woken to see them and realised they were actually making love, she'd been stunned. She couldn't believe how incredibly hot it was to see her brother having sex with Weather. It was so damn erotic. Alexis had touched herself, her hand caressing her pussy and rubbing her clit. As they'd made love in front of her, Weather's eyes radiating heat, arousal and love, Alexis had pictured Aidan's erection penetrating Weather, spreading her young pussy, and imagined herself being the one, making love to Aidan when she was that young. She'd moaned and slipped a finger into her own sopping pussy. She'd stared at their body movements, timing her finger with theirs, and when she saw Weather climax, a cute frown appearing, brows knit, eyes softening and closing in pleasure. Such a sexy and arousing sight. Alexis had climaxed with her daughter, pleasure and excitement thundering through her, breasts aching, pussy pulsing, climaxing hard. For the first time in her life, Alexis wondered what touching her daughter would feel like. She trembled. Maybe one day she'd find out. Making love while we were all in the same bed changed things. Weather and Alexis stayed in my bed and seemed to have no shyness when I'd make love with one or the other. In fact, based on whispered conversations between mother and daughter and glances my way, I was quite sure they were enjoying themselves beyond sex with me. They'd refuse to include me in conversations, yet I'd see Weather's eyes open wide as if astonished at something her mother had said. Alexis grinning. And one morning I discovered some of what the two girls in my life had been up to. A surprisingly enjoyable discovery. It started with a soft, moist feeling waking me on an autumn morning, cool sunlight streaming through the windows, lighting the bedroom brightly. I felt refreshed from a deep sleep, lazy and comfortably relaxed. It took perhaps 3 seconds for a sleepy mind to process. I heard quiet whispers, moistness on my cock, movement, teasing and murmuring that I seemed to feel in my penis. Eyes popped open. "Oh, you're awake," Alexis said with a warm, excited smile. I glanced down and groaned deeply. Weather had my cock in her mouth. She was sucking gently, and I could feel her tongue caress and explore. "Suck gently, honey," Alexis said. A wave of dizziness passed over me as Weather followed her mother's advice. "So, Aidan?" Alexis's smile was bright and wicked at the same time. "How does it feel to have your daughter sucking you?" My groan made her grin, and then Weather bobbed her head, pressing down. I felt every millimetre Weather took into her wide-open mouth. I felt the tip touch the back of her mouth. I felt her press harder, trying to get more of me in, and her sudden gagging sent pulses of pleasure through me. "No, honey, you have to pretend you're swallowing food. Look, like this." Cool air hit my erection. Feverish eyes watched my sister bend, her hand holding my cock upright. Alexis's lips slipped over the crown, mouth opening. She pressed down, her soft tongue tickling at first, then caressing. I felt the back of her mouth. God, seeing Alexis with my cock in her mouth was so sexy. And as I watched in astonishment, pleasure flooding my body, I felt her swallow, felt my cock slip deeper, felt her tongue on my shaft, and saw her lips slip down my erection. She had half of my length in her mouth then, 3/4. "Jesus!" I groaned as her lips touched my pubic hair. I'd never been deep-throated in my life. Never. And my God. "Kay. Now me. Mom. Let me try." Weather glanced at me. A grin appeared. "I'm gonna try, Dad. Don't move, okay?" Oh God. The way Alexis slowly lifted, her throat massaging my whole erection, and the little parting kiss on the crown had me aching. But seeing Weather's determined expression and her mouth open, slipping it over me and taking my crown into her warm, moist mouth, one hand holding my shaft, the other cupping my balls, it almost ended it for me. A pulse of pleasure hit, the type that precedes a climax. Remember, pretend you're swallowing food, Alexis advised. And if he comes, try to swallow in time with his pulses so you don't choke. Oh God, oh God! Weather's eyes looked up at her mother and she nodded, her mouth full of cock. It pressed my erection to the back of her mouth. When I felt suction, it was too much. Seeing Weather sucking me off was too much. Pleasure crashed through me. I heaved, my cock swelling. I thrust uncontrollably, pressing against Weather's throat. Semen raced and exploded into my daughter's mouth. Before anyone could react, I came again. A massive surge, semen jetting into Weather's mouth in a long, agonizing spurt. I saw her cheeks puff out. Semen came squirting out from her lips. I heaved again, exquisite pleasure pounding me as I spurted again, hard, hard. Weather's cheeks puffed out again, thick white cum leaking to run down my shaft. Weather yanked her mouth off me gagging, cum dripping from her mouth as I exploded. A long arch of cum launched into the air. Alexis grabbed my shaft and stroked as I climaxed, lost in ecstasy, coming to images of semen exploding from my 14-year-old daughter's mouth. I heaved and ached and came in a wonderful orgasm until finally it released me from its grip, waning, pulses fading away. Collapsing, I panting, my eyes closed. Sorry, Mum. I choked on it. He came so fast he surprised me. It feels like there's so much more when he comes in my mouth. I think you did just fine for your first time, Alexis said, but you really didn't have to try deep throating. I wanted to. One of the girls back home claimed she could do it. I wanted to try. I almost got there too. You'll get there. Hey Aiden, bro, wakey wakey lazy bones. I grumbled without opening my eyes. I rather felt like taking a nap for some reason. Come on, Dad. We're all taking a shower together. My eyes popped open. Weather lay by the crystal clear turquoise pool glancing down at her bikini, the pink matching her toenails very nicely. She liked how her breasts had grown and filled out the bikini a bit more. Aiden liked it too. It was easy to tell the way he groped all the time. Weather, put more sunscreen on. Okay, she yelled back at Mom in the kitchen. Weather liked the new house. When the neighbours had stopped renting it, Aiden had moved in and rented out his old place next door. She liked having a pool to cool off in. She'd been right, the pool was warmer than the sea. This house had lots more rooms, bigger rooms. It even had a big eat-in kitchen. She missed the old place sometimes though. It was so cute, so compact, you had to practically live in each other's lap and bump into things. That was nice. But this was better, she grinned. Aiden, despite all the room, still managed to knock into everything. Weather, I said, put on more sunscreen or you'll have to come inside. Okay, Mum, I will. She wondered if another dip might be better. She'd seen Aiden staring at her pussy after swimming. She knew he was looking at the dark shadow of her pubes, her bush still a bit small, but covering her mons nicely. With a twinge of pleasure, Weather wondered if Aiden would like to give her a bikini trim. How fun would that be? The intensity of oral sex, Aiden eating her pussy, had shocked her the first time, but she'd become rather addicted. In fact, even Mum caressing her in the shower had sent her into heaven. That had been a shock too. Sex was fantastic. This age of consent thing was stupid. How could feeling so good be bad? You'd better obey your mother. Put sunscreen on. Weather glanced over at Aiden, stretched out next to her in swimming trunks, the sunlight bleaching his soft chest hair. Gorgeous, sexy eyes looked at her. She felt a pulse of arousal. You put it on me, she said with a grin. When he didn't agree, she added, Please, Dad. She knew exactly how he'd react. Yup, there it was, a slight twitch in his bathing suit. She mostly called him Aiden, but he always reacted funny when she called him Dad. He'd get positively dopey if she called him Daddy. I'd be delighted, he said, sitting up, grinning, his eyes carefully trailing over her body. Lunch, guys. Oh, Mom, can't it wait? Dad was going to put sunscreen on me. Aiden grinned at her. Come on. he said, offering his hand to help her up. Do we have to? It's Mum's cooking. Shh. Don't be rude, Weather. She's trying. How about a siesta after lunch? Weather inquired, her eyebrows moving up and down. Maybe Mum would like to join us, huh? What do you think? She couldn't stop her scream of pleasure at Aidan's grope and pinch of her butt cheek. I followed Weather's spectacular 15-year-old ass as it undulated seductively, watching it disappear through the wide double doors. I was intensely lucky, incredibly grateful, and happier than I had any right to be. It had taken Weather and me almost 3 weeks to wear Alexis down, but finally she agreed to make me happy. She agreed to stay. I told her that, here, on a Greek island called Santorini, our mother's birthplace, no one knew we were anything but husband and wife. I convinced her she could be a marine biologist here better than Illinois, of all places. I told her the truth. I wanted nothing more in this world than her and Weather. That's it, nothing more. Did you tell Weather we would take a siesta together? All 3 of us? Alexis asked as I walked into the kitchen, interrupting my musing. Something smelled burned. Weather sat at the kitchen table, grinning at me, gorgeous steel grey eyes sparkling. My sister smiled and walked over to me, kissing my cheek softly. Are you sure you have that much stamina, Tiger? I had a sudden vision of my sister on hands and knees as I gently took her from behind, her magnificent pear-shaped ass in the air, Weather lying on the bed, legs spread wide, her mother softly kissing her pussy. Damn! Yes, I had more than enough stamina, I decided with a smile.